Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show once again. Coming at you at a very different time. Same place, though. Same subjects. Same things to go into. But we are coming to you on this Wednesday afternoon because we got a game in just over 24 hours. So we got to get on it quickly. We got a quick turnaround this week. I am Brendan. That is Brandon. And we got some Seahawks stuff to talk about. We got a big game coming up tomorrow. Divisional tilt. One of the teams that has really beaten down on us these last couple of years. We need a win. We need to turn this around. But before we get there, I think we're going to have to spend a little bit more time than we would like to, and maybe a little bit more time than we would want to, talking about this previous Giants game. How you doing today, Brandon?
Doing great, all things being considered, but hopefully we can turn around on this quick schedule this week with Niners and surprise pull off a shocker.
Well, maybe not so much of a shocker right now. You look at that Niners team, they're having some of the same problems we are. Misery loves company. I'll tell you that, right?
It does, yeah. I think they're a little bit in better shape where they haven't had as much of the guffaw games that we've had these past two that have been really so bad. They've been in pretty much every game, and they've been right there as far as the games just kind of slipped through their fingers there at the end. But I think that they've definitely done a bit better than we have on that part as far as making sure they're competitive in it.
Right. So we got a lot to talk about with this Niners game tomorrow, but like I said, this show would not be complete if we didn't at least spend some time talking about yesterday's game, this most recent game, the Sunday game against the New York Giants. And, I'll tell you, on what was the longest day of NFL football in the history of the NFL, because of how late the Sunday night game went. I mean, that game, if you're a Seahawks fan, for a lot of Seahawks fans, it took the joy out of a really, really good day of Sunday football. And it kind of took the joy out of a really promising start to the 2024 season. And in some ways, you could even say it kind of takes the joy out of anticipation of what's going to happen in the next 12 games. So what do we say about that game overall, other than just what a disappointment?
Yeah, you never want to try to draw too much away from a single game, but I think that your thoughts on this and the viewpoint on it is one that I share, where it is not, there are things that hit differently. This is coming on the heels of the Lions game and that way that it looked on that as well. And it does have you sort of rechecking where I think we were all starting to get up in the clouds a little bit after that 3-0 start. And this has been, if we went 3 steps forward, you went 3 steps back in these last 2 games. And we feel like we're a little bit back somewhat to square one here. On top of the fact the injury situation doesn't seem to be getting any better anytime soon necessarily, which is another compounding factor to this. But it just seems like we got to get back into more of that patient, let this play out, and less having the dreamy eyes for the season being about contention. They can certainly still get to that point, but it's looking like it's going to be a harder and harder road to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it as we go into 6 here. And, one thing that I was saying after that game was over was it's also an opportunity to remind ourselves as Seahawks fans that we need to see these guys actually do it before we assume that they have it. Because one of the things that I saw, one of the things that I felt from the fan base over the last several months is that they were already kind of anointing Mike McDonald, right? They were already like, okay, we know we have the coach, and this game was a reminder that you actually have to go out there and do it. You actually have to go out there and have success and win games before we just say, okay, we know we have the right coach. And I think we probably still do have the right coach, don't get me wrong, but that game was a keen reminder that, like, just because we think he will be the right guy doesn't mean he's going to start doing everything right immediately. And I will say, I think in that game, he did some things very clearly wrong. And I think there are some very hard lessons that he had to learn in that game. So hopefully he does learn them. But it's really frustrating when those lessons come in a game against a not very good team and a not very good offense that is missing their 2 best playmakers. And I think that's probably the side of the ball that I'm most frustrated with right now, although both sides of the ball are very frustrating. So How do you give up almost 450 yards to Daniel Jones with no Malik Neighbors and no Devin Singletary? What do you think they did wrong?
Well, they didn't really try to take anything away from the Giants. I think that if you're gonna have a day you're struggling on, you try to find something that you can at least remove from the offense if everything's going bad. If you're not generating pressure or creating turnovers or stopping the run or stopping the pass, well, lean in on something then. Find something that you can at least put them into making them somewhat one-dimensional on, even if they're still having success on that one thing that is one-dimensional. This defense just sort of allowed them to do whatever they wanted and didn't seem to have a method to the madness on what they were trying to accomplish. It wasn't clear on what McDonald was doing exactly. A lot of deep drops in zone. The blitz rate was okay, but the blitzes were weird. 5-man blitzes and not a lot of overload stuff, not a lot of stack fronts, not a lot of stuff that really McDonald was known for prior to coming here over these past 2 losses, which has made it very weird to look at because structurally it looks more like akin to what we were running the last 5, 6 years defensively when you look at those fronts right now. And it just leaves you scratching your head a little bit. I don't think you can undersell the fact that the injury part factors in here. No Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu still done. Derek Hall ends up with a sore foot. Tariq Woolen gets his ankle rolled. You've got Rashawn Jenkins with a club on his hand. I don't think Jerome Baker's still playing at 100%. Leonard Williams is nowhere near his normal, typical self. Byron Murphy still does remain out. I mean, you lose half your defense in the NFL. This kind of is what happens even if you're playing against a bad offense like this on the other side of it. It's just too many bodies lost, I think, to a degree. But in addition, I think McDonald didn't do as many things he could to try to, much like the previous week against Detroit, didn't try to really scheme much up to help out the lack of talent that was going to be out there. And that was a little bit dissuading to me.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that. Maybe he just doesn't feel comfortable doing those exotic things yet. Maybe he feels like the players won't be able to execute it to the extent that he needs it. But I did come away from that game kind of feeling like when we blitzed, it was pretty telegraphed. Like you knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And if I know it's coming at home, I'm pretty sure the other team will know that it's coming. Not to say we didn't get pressure in that game. We actually got a decent amount of pressure, but I was expecting a little bit more, especially in that game where you don't have Mafe, you don't really have Nwosu. You're going to need to dial some exotic stuff up, and we just didn't see that.
No, and I don't know what you have to sort of lose by going to the safe road of it. We've seen it for years here. It's like prevent defense prevents nothing. And this safe style of defense with these 4-man fronts and expecting your 4-man fronts are going to hold up with that running game when they're same stretched out stuff watching the All-22 that we saw from last year. Defensive tackles squished down, wide 9 edges out wide. That when they want to come down and run downhill in the run game, they hit the duo blocks and they hit you at the point of attack and you get moved back and you give up yards and everybody's scrambling to get to their gap then because they're trying to have too many bodies from the back end come up front then to fill those gaps and they're not able to go get it done. So, again, to me, go to more 3-4 looks then. Stop with the 4-man fronts. Go 3-4. Load up the box. Bring down a safety. Do something different other than just lining it up over the course of the game and running it the same, which is what it really appeared to me, even going back and watching the All-22. It's not that there weren't some flicks in there, but like you said, there was telegraphed when you did it. There wasn't a lot of setup to it. It was just sort of like throwing it at a wall when you did decide to blitz in this game rather than there being something that you really were confusing them on. And it's been that way so far to begin with. You might be right about the details of it. Could be that this just takes the scheme this long to kind of on board, and we'll have to wait through the year for all those details to get in there. But after years of watching us go down in this fashion, it was kind of brutal and tough to have to watch it once again in the same manner that we've seen so many times over the past few years.
Yeah, and that was another thing too. This is not what this fan base needs. They don't need to see that stuff again, right? We've seen enough of that, and we were hoping to leave that in the rearview mirror. But you touched on something that I really noticed from that game too, which was it kind of felt like we went through that game as if we had Big Cat at 100% and Byron Murphy out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're sitting in those 2-man fronts with the 2 edge rushers. And if you have Leonard Williams at 100% and you have Byron Murphy, you can probably get away with that. Byron Murphy's already one of the best players in the league at eating up double teams and still having an impact on the play. And Leonard Williams is, an extraordinary player. He's been off to an extraordinary start when healthy so far this year. That's the thing that I think really bothered me in this game about the run defense. Like the defensive line that we had was doing the best that they could, but they were able to get offensive linemen up on our linebackers over and over and over again because our guys up front, they just can't eat up the double teams the way that we need them to if we're going to run those two-man fronts. So that you didn't elevate a nose tackle from the practice squad like Quentin Bohanna or Matt Gotel even, and run those three-man fronts so you could at least keep your linebackers somewhat clean. I feel like that was one of the big problems in this game. So it's like they didn't adjust the game plan when they realized Murphy wasn't going to play almost.
Yeah, I agree. And I know it's a short week and they don't have as much time to implement something that's, complicated, but it also should be a bit, I would think at this point, to a degree baked in. And I keep coming back to the fact of this is if you know as a coaching staff, you're this shorthanded, because if we can see it on the field that, okay, you're this shorthanded, the front guys are not getting it done, and you're getting a Giants team that's basically moving the ball at will at you on the day, why not just try something different? If it gets hit, then so be it. At least it's not a 15-play drive that eats up 12 minutes that keeps your very efficient offense off the football field. It's part of the problem with this whole slow bleed drive thing that these defenses will lean into, where it's, okay, you made the offense work for it, but you made it still easy for them. And now they control the time of possession and now they control the clock. Where versus if you take some risks, maybe you get hit on the back end, but maybe you also cause some things on the front end from time to time too, because they're not causing anything. We're not coming close to causing it with those light front four and the dropping people to deep coverage. You're not coming close to causing a turnover. The turnover in this game happened because the ball carrier landed the ball off of his own teammate's helmet. That is how you got the one fumble in this game. And the prior week against Detroit, it was much of the same stuff. When you're not getting close to causing turnovers, when you're not getting close to getting interceptions, it shows you a little bit your players are not tight on those guys then at that point. So you're probably playing things a little bit too loose. And so that's the problem I have with this is like, what do you have to lose a little bit? It's like last week, the Detroit, it's like you keep doing the same thing. It's not working throughout the course of the game. Make an adjustment, try something else. And if you get beat on it, the fans aren't going to get mad. No one's going to get pissed at that. It's the first year here with you as a coach. You've got house money, use it. Don't go down the way we've been going down for years here. Just that's the part that really frustrates me coming out of this game. And it frustrates me because I don't want to see it anymore. Let's change that. We lose 45-20. And it's because we went blitz heavy or we did a couple casinos or we went like that. I'd be like, great, at least we're trying something different. And we're understanding we're down 7 defenders. We're not going to beat this team straight up. We're not going to beat the Niners down 6 guys, basically. And if Leonard Williams is out there in the same shape he was last week, Brendan, he's basically out. If Boy is even out there, is he near 100%? No, it's basically kind of out there doing his best, trying to get through it. So you got to manufacture. And if we get beat by the Niners 45-12, trying to manufacture something, then I'm okay with that. At least you tried. At least you tried to do something. But so much of the past 2 weeks, this has been just sort of just lean back on our heels. Just do whatever you want. Whatever, man. Whatever you want to do, just do whatever. And it does get frustrating watching that.
Yeah, and I'm genuinely shocked that they weren't okay with risking Daniel Jones beating you over the top of all people. Like, Jared Goff's got an arm. Jared Goff can get it deep. That's we can agree to disagree on that. I'd still say I want to take some chances, but okay, I can understand that Lions offense is going to punish you when you try to throw something exotic out there. But Daniel Jones, I know he hit one deep ball in this game, but I'm sorry, I'm going to take that gamble every single time if I can get it.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to hit that play reliably. So that's the part of this that is really shocking. And also on the player side of it, because we've been obviously very critical of the game plan in that game, very critical of the coaches, which I think is, of course, very obviously valid. I feel like the linebackers in this game, there was a lot of confusion back there. A lot of running plays where you had 2 linebackers occupying the same gap. A lot of plays where you had 2 players occupying the same zone in coverage. So there's probably still some communication issues back there as well. That was part of why this game went the way that it did.
Yeah. I mean, we do come back to the bottom line on this is that the things that are happening are also when it's the miscommunication issues, or if it's a linebacker in a different gap, those things are less I'm going to rail on, because that is an understandable part of onboarding this scheme. And it's a new scheme, and they're going to be, as we talked about the offseason, there's going to be those times where you're going to have to kind of go through the treacherous waters to get to the calm waters, and there's no way around it. And it means there's going to be some tough moments like that in games like that. I don't have as big a problem with that type of stuff. I can get that. And that stuff's like, that's going to happen, I think. And especially early in the season, it's going to happen on that edge. But yeah, I saw the same thing, which made it weird to me that Dodson and Baker came out so highly graded in this game, because I didn't think they played that well of a game.
Yeah, I really disagreed with that, especially Dodson, who I thought was just miserable with his run fits. Yeah. Baker, Maybe, Baker, because technically they gave him the forced fumble. I know he didn't do it. I know he had very little to do with that, but technically they gave it to him. He also had a lot of stops in the run game. I actually thought maybe Baker, because they did ding him for coverage correctly. But Dodson, I thought they had him coming and going.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So that's most of the stuff on the defensive side of the ball. Trey Brown had a miserable game, but that's the kind of stuff that I think, every now and then a player like that is going to have a bad game. He's not an elite corner, and he's the guy who's going to get picked on because they don't throw at Woolen anymore. They've just completely given up on that. To my eye, Woolen was not targeted once in this game. So a game like that will happen every now and then. I'm going to give him the opportunity to get back up, but that was probably the worst game of Trey Brown's career.
Indeed, I agree. And disappointing from his standpoint because he's trying to go get a big contract this offseason, can't have those games up on tape.
Right. So anything else you want to say about the defense in this one?
No, that'd be about my cumulative thoughts on it.
All right. So now we go over to the offense real quick. I think we got to spend a little bit of time there as well. I will say I think that Giants defense is pretty talented, so I kind of get having a bad game against them. What I don't get is I don't know if you've noticed this, Brandon, because it's really kind of been hard to notice. The Seahawks are throwing the ball a lot this year. Like, a lot of people probably didn't notice that if you watch the games. Like, they're sneaking it in there. You barely notice, but this team, man, they are throwing the ball a lot.
Yeah, they are. And definitely, I think that I kind of do backtrack this one a little bit, especially the past 2 weeks with throwing it as much as they're throwing it. And I wouldn't kick out anything in the legs as far as this team needs to do a better job about running the ball and being more consistent and staying with it. I also think that when you have a symptom, I think that this is something that happens to offensive coordinators, Brendan, where if you have a defense that in a first half, for instance, that's living on the football field, that's not getting off the field, I think that there's a downward thing that then affects to the offense, where now the offense and the offensive coordinator specifically starts to go, oof, less possessions. Oof, when I get out there on the field for the possession I get out there for, I've got to maximize that thing because I might not get the ball back for another 10 minutes. And so it starts to inform, I think, sometimes the OCs a little bit, say nothing of if the defense is also giving up points in addition to that, where they start to now lean away from the running game. I think Waldron did this at times when our defense would get bad, where he'd go, man, I've only had 2 possessions this half and we're deep into the second quarter. I got to let it rip, start throwing the ball a bit here. So I think there's a bit of a human tendency here on that being one kind of informs the other a little bit, but also we do need to stay more committed to, running the football in addition to that, I would say. That's I think it's completely fair with that. So they're definitely 2 pass happy, but I think some of it is also that other side of the coin causing it.
Yeah, I understand the anxiety, right? Because it was very clear early in that game the defense didn't have it. Right from the start, 3rd and 17, they give up a screen pass for 18 yards. Giants marching down the field. They get down to the 1-inch line. They fumble, but it's pretty clear the defense just isn't having a good day from the very start. I imagine Grubb sees that and he's like, okay, I got to go. I got to get going. I get it. But as an offensive coordinator, you need to fight the urge to give into that because this game was never out of hand. The Giants were never up by 21 points or 14 points. The game was a 1-score game for almost the entire time. It wasn't until the 4th quarter when it was a 2-score game. And even then, it wasn't out of hand. There was one drive in this game, really, where we couldn't afford to run the ball. That was the touchdown drive right before the 2-minute warning. Other than that, there was no reason to abandon the run if you look at the scoreboard. I understand that the defense wasn't making you feel comfortable, but you have to resist that urge. And Ryan Grubb has an urge, right? We know he loves to throw the ball. We know he loves it, but you've got maybe the best running backs in the league. There might not be a better 1-2 punch out there. And you've got an offensive line that can't really pass protect that well right now. If they're good at anything, and I don't know if they're good at anything, they're better at run blocking. You got to lean into it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it. I think Grubb's also kind of reading a little bit of what's going on so far too, where when you look at the running game for the Seahawks, and as good as it's been at times this year, every single time that the running game has been good this year, it's been good into the second half. If we look at their rushing numbers and we look at the average yard per carry in the first half for your Seahawks and the rushes that they've had throughout these first 5 games, It's putrid. If you look at the numbers, it's probably averaging something like 2 yards a carry in the first half or something like that. Now we get it going into that second half, but I'm sure Grubb's also aware of those numbers coming into this game, and I'm not excusing it with it. I think that's another factor to consider is like we're not running blocking well through the first quarter of the season here on these games in the first half at all. Like it's not even a matter of like we're being kind of inefficient. Well, it's bad run blocking, and the numbers do back this up when you look at the run blocking efficiency out there. I'm not just talking about the PFF scores on run blocking, by the way, which factors in a lot of other extra stuff. But if you look at actually win run blocking rates up front, you're not that much better from where you are as a pass protecting unit. And so I think that that's also a bit of a part of this that comes into play on that from Grubb's side. It's not to say that he shouldn't run the ball more. It should, but that he's also got to be aware that when we're not running the ball early in the games, we're not creating holes in the games. We're allowing a lot of early penetration early in games when we run the ball. Makes it harder to have the confidence to go to it. In addition to that, especially when the passing attack is working and is being more efficient versus one to the other. I think the running game is being explosive, but I don't think it's being efficient, and I don't think it's being consistent.
Right. Although it is worth noting, though, that in 2 of those games so far this year, we've had no Ken Walker. And Charbonnet's not really the guy who's going to overcome bad run blocking, right? He's the guy who needs the good run blocking. With Walker out there, you've got a little bit of a better chance of overcoming the poor run blocking. So
Yeah,
I think that has to factor in a little bit.
I don't think, though, that an offensive coordinator wants to call a play where he's like, okay, my running back will have to overcome these guys that aren't going to be able to block the guys on this play. I think you'll always get an OC then who has then the tendency to go, oh, I've got a quarterback playing top 5 rate. I've got 3 playmakers on the outside. Like that seems more of a win. I'm not, again, saying we shouldn't run the ball more, but I do think that it's less complicated than just run the ball. Because I think what we'll find is if we come out in this game, Brendan, and you run Kenneth Walker against the San Francisco 49ers and you run him early and you run into the second quarter and he ends out through the first half and he's got 13 carries, I bet it's probably going to be for about 36 yards. So, that's fine. You can work him down and wear him down throughout the game. And by the second half, now he starts breaking through and you can, okay, that's great. But then that also means there might be some offensive inefficiency, some drives that stall out then because of that commitment to then run ball early at that point.
Yeah. And I get it too, right? Like as an offensive coordinator, you don't want to just run the ball. You want to run the ball well. And we have seen NFL offenses in recent memory decide to completely abandon the run and have success. I remember some of those Brady Belichick offenses in like the early 10s would like pretend they don't have running backs. And Brady would just drop back and throw it 60 times a game. And they made it work pretty well. They found ways to make it work. I'm not saying that it can't work. But the problem is the offensive line is not just bad at run blocking. They're also bad at pass blocking. And Geno's getting killed back there because of it. And it also opens the way for something like that 4th and 1 play, where it's 4th and 1, you're going for it in your own territory. It's kind of a must convert situation. And the Giants know you're not going to run the ball, kind of. And Brian Burns even kind of talked about that a little bit, about how, there was nothing to fear there. And it opens up these situations where you get to just pin your ears back as a pass rusher. And it's tough to overcome. So I understand the need to run the ball well on top of just running the ball, but I think you got to try it a few more times before you just write it off.
I'm with that, completely with that.
Mm-hmm. And I looked this up this week because I was wondering if maybe there was a little bit of this going on here, but according to the numbers that I've seen, the Seahawks have seen a relatively average amount of single high on defenses from the opposing defense compared to the rest of the league. So it's not like teams are living in single high and we can't run the ball because the boxes are stacked. No, we're seeing about an average amount of 2 high safeties as any other team out there. So it's not that.
Which is part where we come back to the guys aren't getting it done up front in the run blocking game. That's across the league right now. There's offenses like the Cardinals that force you down to the 8th man in the box and forcing. Niners dealt with this all last week, dealing with the Cardinals in that game where the safety's down there and he's living down there. If you're in base, if you're in 2 tight end or you're 1 tight end and Kyle Juszczyk, essentially kind of 2 tight end or 1 fullback, 1 tight end, they're going base package. So you've got 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, then you're bringing the safety. You've got 8 men up around that box. They have to commit that to the Niners as good as they are defensively to stopping that Cardinal run. You have teams that do the opposite to you, where you have 4-man fronts. You'll have the linebackers and the safeties are back, basically, and they can still get the job done. They're getting penetration into the backfield. They're getting push, where not only are you not getting kind of that, okay, we just want you to get a draw, lineman. Maybe you don't get any push up the field, but it's a draw in the play. What you're getting instead is you're getting actual pushed back by your lineman into the backfield in these run plays where it's getting that bad. And I think that's part of what throws Grubb off is he's like, these aren't just not getting a 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I'm getting negative 2-yard plays when I'm running the ball. I'm having penetration. We're running, Walker gets away from the first penetration, but it's all he can do to go get a 2-yard gain. And that's the confounding part a little bit to me too, where it's light boxes and you're still getting run over on that a little bit. Not a good sign on that side of it, but it also is what it is.
Yeah, even Lakin, and he's out there to run block because he's certainly not out there to pass block. I didn't think he played well run blocking in this last game. I didn't think the right side of the offensive line played well. I mean, you got Bradford is theoretically out there because he has the strength to run block that Christian Haynes doesn't have. I didn't really see much from him in this game. It's disappointing, right? When you see stuff like that.
Yep. I would like to see it. And it's one of the reasons I said making offensive line the center point of this last offseason, and fans are getting impatient with it. And, John's got to come back around somehow or another on this and make his peace with God on this to whatever bridge he can't seem to cross to get to the other side of making it a point of emphasis in an offseason. He's got to do it. It ain't about, we'll put the defense up. We'll get this thing, or we'll get the offensive line fixed for the first time in 10 years, John. Like, you've had 10 years at this thing, and I've supported him in the process of slowly building this thing up. But he also didn't do what I've advised to be done the past 2 off seasons, and it's come back and bit us over and over again, ignoring kind of what people are saying, do this on, and continues to kind of turn away from it. And then you get bit by it, and you're like, dude, you can't pass protect, you can't run block, but you've also got to lean on your offense because your defense is in a yearly basis kind of crap. What are you doing? Why do you keep ignoring this one spot and not hitting it in the way you need to really hit it? Like Lincoln Tomlinson, Evan Brown, Austin Blythe, Gabe Jackson. It's cheap, 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 cheap. And you pay cheap, you get cheap back.
Yeah, and you know who looks really good so far this year, by the way, in I think Arizona is Evan Brown. I'm not happy about that. That does not make me happy.
No, and they got him playing left guard versus us at center, but
Yeah.
playing probably better left guard than Lincoln is, to your point.
Yeah. That agitates me. I'll put it to you that way. Also, another thing about this offense, I don't feel like it was like the big problem in this game. I don't. But no. I'm sick of this rotation at right guard. I don't like rotating offensive linemen. I think that accomplishes the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish, which is allowing these players to build continuity and a level of comfort playing with each other. I want to pick one guy and go with it. I don't even really care who it is. You got to pick one guy and just let them go the whole game.
Agreed. I'm in the same place with it. I was not one of those people as much pushing to try to get Bradford out of there. I can acknowledge that the game that he's playing is bad, but I'm not as certain that the solution people thought that Haynes was going to be the guy to fix that was as true, because I don't think he's quite ready there. It'd be great if he was. I wish he was. I think he's still got a lot of talent, but he's just not ready. And maybe Bradford's, not that much better or about the same with it. But to your point, if you want a good offensive line, you want a line that's going to get better throughout the course of the season, flipping things through and spinning guys through on a carousel is not going to accomplish that. And we've tried it before. We've tried this before. Did it do it before? Did years with Carroll rotating offensive linemen build a great offensive line? Did it, by the end of the year, build the most cohesive and most highest performing offensive line by the end of the season versus the start of the season? No, quite the opposite, actually. So again, back to your point, no, I don't believe in rotating either. Trust your 5, let them get the chemistry on point, go through the bumps in the roads on this, and see if by the end of the year you can get the benefits of that in that cohesion.
Yeah, and at least when Carroll did it at least he had logic behind it, right? Like, he did it with Gabe Jackson because Gabe Jackson would play 30 plays and then his knee would give out. So you would pull him out because you could only use him for short periods. He did that with we had that one guard in Mike Upati, because Upati was old and breaking down and could only go for a few plays. Last year he did it with Jason Peters because Peters was a billion years old and they could only go for so long. But you've got a second-year player in Bradford and you got a rookie in Christian Haynes. They're not breaking down out there. They're not unable to play more than 30 snaps in a game before they're just done. They can go the whole game. Now, maybe they won't play well, but I think you're going to get better results when you just let them play the whole game and get into the rhythm and flow of the offense, and you let everybody get used to playing with each other.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's what offensive line coaches and what offensive linemen have told us for years in addition to it. It's not our opinion on this. This is what they have said. So I think that if it's what they're telling you from the position you need to have to get the best performing unit, we should probably listen to them. And it's not something you see as a commonality throughout the league where coaches all across the board are flipping through linemen in spots. And that's, again, should tell you something, I think, from a coaching staff perspective on this. So, yeah, I'd much prefer just roll with one guy and let him go at that point.
Yeah. And again, I don't care which one it is at this point. I think I would prefer Bradford still because I think he's more talented. And I think they're trying to convert Haynes to the left side, which I like long term. But pick one and go with it. I don't care that much which one.
Yeah, I don't either. It's not about which guy I've got my dog in the fight on. Just go with one, stay with them, and let him and roll through the ups and downs that you're going to get with them out there, and call it a day on that. And that'll be the better route, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Also, real quick, well, we talked about the defense, talked about the offense. Got to spend a second on special teams here because are you missing Larry Izzo yet?
I mean, a little bit, yeah. I mean, it's a freakish play. I've never seen that play happen before in the way that they did it. So it's, and I know we've got the fumble on the punt return, but other than that, it's special teams has been whatever. A lot of fans got caught up on that last play. I got to be honest with you. It's really one that just does not really blip much on my radar. Fans have a tendency, Brendan, at times. I see it all the time in my chat after games, all the time. 140 plays are in a game. Say it again, 140 plays are in a football game. Yet we'll grab this one play and we'll say, okay, all the rest of those plays, throw that off the table. Just this one. And I really don't like it. I don't understand it because that's what you're doing. It's the same thing people do with the Super Bowl play from our second Super Bowl. It's the same thing. I mean, Jesus Christ, even Nick Saban's still doing this crap the other week talking about it. And it's not about the final play down to Marshawn. No, it's not about the final block kick. It's about the 149 other effing plays where there was a theme, there was a trend, there was a line of what you could see for why you ended up in the place you ended up in this football game. And that's the better explanation for why you win or lose this versus this kind of, to me, somewhat of a fluky-ish play on how it goes down on the other side of it. And I'm consistent on that. I say that about that with the second Super Bowl play. I say it about this kind of play with it. And I'll never be that kind of guy that really gets too much on the single individual play, especially if there's so much of a game where it's not back and forth, right, Brendan? Where it's like give and take constantly, where it's like, well, we got him this one, they got us back. We got him this one, we got him back. And you literally get to the end of the game where it's sort of into that 50-50 range of things where you could maybe understand it at that point. But that's not the case in this one. You let Daniel Jones cut you in half. You let them run the ball down your throat at will. That's what you lost this game, plain and simple. That is it ain't well, but the field goal that right there.
Right. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. The reason why I said that, our special teams were not good before that play, though. I think coming into the day, we were like bottom 8 in DVOA on special teams, and after that game, we were like bottom 5. So something's not quite right there. I think even back in like that Dolphins game, you're seeing little things like the kick returns are coming out a little longer. The punt returns that we're giving up are more than we're used to. There's something not quite right on that side of the ball so far, I feel like.
It could be. I'm not as much getting the sense with it myself. There's been a couple blunders with it. There's been some like Dixon, for instance, on a couple of his kicks where he's trying to flip the field back from his own 5. And so what does he do? He missile launches it, but he doesn't get the height on the ball, sends it on a direct line. The punt returner gets it back with a lot of room to work with. Is that on Harbaugh? Did Harbaugh then tell him, we got to try to flip this field, so let's just take the risk of hitting it deep on that? You get a couple of those plays. It's a small amount of the season so far through 5 games, so we're still kind of at a sample size of data on that kind of stuff to me, when you especially consider special teams plays throughout a game or a very small amount of them. So I'll be more into concentrating that by the end of the year where I've got more data to go off of on a new special teams coach, but it hasn't been a great start, at least. I'll say that. He hasn't necessarily been killing it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's most of what we can say about this Giants game. Anything else jump out to you? Anything else occur to you?
Geno's carrying the offense, man, and playing like a top 3 quarterback in the sport. And so, he continues to be at that high water mark. No problems with him.
Yeah, him and Lockett were pretty good in this game, but other than that, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody else to single out positively, I think. I don't know, maybe AJ Barner, I guess. He's actually he's advocating for more playing time right now. I like what I see.
Yeah, well, and then on the other side of it, Noah Fant's giving you a lot of nothing this year. So the one game with the 7 catches, but other than that, it's been really disappointed for the money that we're spending on Noah. And I'll tell you this, man, right now, the way the season's played out with a couple of guys on this roster, it's going to be very easy for John to make some very, very simple cuts at the end of this season with a couple of these guys as it stands right now.
Right. Yeah, Noah fan. I'm just kind of confused. It's like there's not even like an effort to get him involved. Sometimes it feels like it's like he's just there. I don't think he got targeted once in the first 55 minutes of that game.
Yeah, I just they don't seem to have a plan for him. Haven't had a plan for him since they brought him in here. His production was much higher with Denver prior to coming here. And you thought after they gave him the money this offseason that there would be a plan in place, but you just don't quite get that. And I don't know really why.
Mm-hmm. All right, we got a couple of donos here. We got Feed Me More Seahawks. Thank you for the $2. 49ers run a vanilla defense. Don't make it easy. Right, so they've got even though there was some buzz about it around it, it doesn't look like they're going to pick up Robert Saleh to fix the defense this season. So they're going to be sticking it out with Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley. And what do you see from them so far in San Fran?
Well, those guys are having a hard time with it a little bit. They fired their DC last year, Wilkes, who actually had the defense playing very close to where they've been traditionally. And then they bring these guys in. Staley's got the cover 2 shell background, but the Niners always want to run a lot more of that sort of, cover 3, cover 2. As Feed Me says, it's a little more, we're just going to line up and play things without being extravagant on the back end. They don't do a lot of flipping coverages pre to post snap. A lot of what you see is what you get. The problem is Staley's kind of inherited then a scheme and a system that he doesn't naturally run, right? Because he's from the Fangio tree, which is all about the flipping of the coverages on the back end. And so you can see why this maybe doesn't work exactly for them, trying to have him run something that is not his own. And it has made them a little bit, I think, in tougher shape. They've got an issue right now, right, where they've gotten away for years with that wide 9. So they got 4 down linemen. And what they do with it is in our 4-3 under with Coach Carroll back in the day, we'd have those 4 down linemen pretty close to each other in their gaps. With these guys, they spread them out. And so you end out with wide 9 guys putting their hand down in the dirt in their alignment. You end up with 2 3 techs at times. Rather than a 1 tech and a 3 tech, you get 2 3 techs. And so what this has done in the past is create those natural openings there in the defensive line that if you get downhill quick in the power game, there's holes there. There's natural kind of crevices, but the Niners always played it so well, and their linebackers are always so good about filling the gaps that they could overcome that. What's happening a little bit more now this year is you're seeing they have no Dre Greenlaw in there, and they're having to now bring that safety up into the box a little bit as an extra helper because they can't get it done with that wide 9 in its current shape like that if they roll out that way. So you're talking about running the ball in this game, Brendan, with Walker being committed to it. I know we want to sometimes get Walker to the edges, but this would be the particular game, or Charbonnet, to do more of A and B gap type runs to attack that wide 9 alignment because it's not rolling as well. And one thing to keep in mind with this is that they've not been able to kind of solve their defensive tackle situation. From the moment that they moved on from DeForest Buckner, it kind of slowly created this issue with them at defensive tackle where they've always been trying to chase that line that they had a couple years ago with Armstead and DeBuckner, where Armstead went this offseason. DeForest Buckner's been gone. Top 10 pick Javon Kinlaw went out in free agency. He's out. He didn't really settle in. They signed Javon Hargrave, who's now out for the season, I think, with a torn bicep or pec.
Yeah, bicep, I think.
Bicep. So they're sitting on that interior. We've got that wide 9, and now we also have a little bit of some weakness in there in the structure. Malik Collins is a good pass rusher. I think you can get after him a little bit in the run game, though, as that other defensive tackle they have on that roster. So there's really where you can get after them on in this running game, I think, in this particular game where we can attack them on. But they're a little more vulnerable than they have been in past years in that way.
Right. Wide 9 is how you can have a player on your team with like 16 sacks on the season and the fans still hate him because he's getting run on. Like I remember that's what happened with the Eagles back in the day with Jason Babin. There was one season where he had like 19 sacks and fans still hated him because he was useless against the run, and the sacks just kind of felt like he was stat padding his own numbers. It didn't really affect the game.
Yeah, it's hard to be able to play good as a run defender and discipline as a run defender and then really rush the passer well because you're doing 2 different things kind of. It's almost play the run on your way to the rushing the passer and how you have to run it at times. And we ran into this last week, especially Daniel Jones and the play action stuff where you're kind of holding for a moment on the play action and okay, now I can restart my pass rush, now instead of doing the 2 gap, okay, now I'm back to trying to get after it. So it is something where those guys do that. You hear about players throughout the league, Brendan, that do those kind of business decision things from the edge. And when they rush where it's I'm here to go get my sacks. I'm not as worried about, playing the run. It does make it, I think, harder in a wide 9 because your alignment is to the outside there where you can kind of get in and set the edge. But can you get as much back to like the C gap, right? So like you could hard edge it, but then you do have that natural kind of hole that's there between you and the defensive tackle. Then at that point, when you're aligned out that wide, and that's where you're making it kind of harder on the defender to get himself back into the run play on that versus just setting a hard edge and forcing everything back inside. And the other guys have to go in and then kind of clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this. I think the Niners might have the lightest interior line in the NFL. Like their line is made up of like small, lean, athletic guys. There's not a lot of beef in there.
Yeah, I think that's right. Leonard Floyd's always been rail thin, and Bosa's probably about a 285 guy. Or not 285. He's probably, where's Bosa at? What is he listed at? He's like,
whatever it is, I wouldn't trust it, but he might be like, what, 275, I'll bet?
Yeah, that's probably more like it. His listed weight's nowhere near what he probably is.
Mm-hmm. So
it's
like Bill Walton trying to say he was 6'11" back in the day.
Yeah, they got him at 6'4", 266. I bet he's 255.
Really?
I'm off on that. I bet Bosa's really even a little bit lighter than he's listed. If he's 266, I bet he's another 10. Maybe he's a 2. I don't know. I don't see. He does look like he's super strong. So he's absolutely not he plays the run game well too. So he's a good player on that. But it is hard on those guys in the way that they structure that, and it's worked well for them for years in it. But you need the prime guys. You need that front four that's awesome, right? If you're going to run it that way, then all those guys got to be dogs along that front four, and you need the depth to call on around it to make it go. And they don't quite have that anymore in the same way they once did.
Right. And my understanding, I have a friend who's a Niners fan. From him, the understanding is that Staley's basically there to like loom over Sorensen, and Sorensen's got a really short leash. And if things don't go well, Staley's just going to take over and Sorensen's going to be out, which probably isn't a great way to do business when you just hired Sorensen as well. It's not like Sorensen's been there for 2 years or something.
They did Shanahan's making the Carroll mistakes, right? So what does these coaches do is they get fat with power and they get longer in their tenure, Brendan. They want to do less about bringing outside ideas in. It's more of I'm the grand poobah. I know all. If I'm going to hire, I will hire from within to guys that are going to be essentially yes men. What was Sorensen, a guy with no DC coordinator experience? He was going to be a yes man for Kyle. He's going to do the things the way he wanted to do it. And Wilkes, that's a guy that got them performing at a top 5 defensive rate, Brendan. They blame him for the Super Bowl where his defense played well in that Super Bowl. He loses Dwayne Greenlaw halfway through, which really hurts them in guarding Kelsey at that point because he was shutting down Kelsey. It's really the offense that kind of went in the tank into that second half for the Niners. But he decided to make Wilkes the scapegoat and then brings on a yes man to come in behind him rather than finding a really true dynamic candidate, out there, a real guy that could have, taken that thing. And that's maybe just something what coaches kind of start to do, I think, with time and age at times in spots, but it's not for the betterment of them. I would say if I was a coach on that, you should always keep yourself back to opening. And even the Wilkes hire, which I think in retrospect, the Niners has to look like a successful one, was kind of an outside hire in that you were looking at a guy who didn't exactly run the defense the way you want, but you just knew he's a really smart defensive mind and a guy that could come in here and do it. And so that's where that's a small thing, but I think that's a place that coaches get a little weird about at times.
Yeah.
Belichick was like this. Remember Belichick with Patricia becoming the offensive coordinator?
Yeah. Didn't they have like a triumvirate of offensive coordinators or something?
Yeah. It's like this just human tendency thing that by the end as a head coach, if you've been there for a long time and had success, that you just start hiring these whereas a lot of times they start out, look at like McDonald's starting out, Brendan, he hires a whole staff that's guys that he kind of doesn't know that he just interviews, and is more willing to do that.
Right. Yeah. And KJ Wright, sleeper agent, maybe.
Hey, maybe he'll run he knows how to run a vanilla scheme.
All right. Let's see here. Janeth Kumar, thank you for the $5. Absolutely think that Grubb ran it less to preserve Ken and Zach for this week.
Maybe. It's certainly possible.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of that if that's true, right? Like you need to win that game. And
well, pardon me.
And if that's how you feel, then maybe get Kenny McIntosh out there. Have other running backs that you feel comfortable using. Like, I don't know if I like that. I don't like giving up that Giants loss so you can maybe beat the Niners because, I mean, I don't have all the confidence in the world you're going to win this game, even if you do run Ken and Zach. So if that's true, I can't say that I like it.
It's a possibility, certainly with Zach, or certainly with Kenneth. He's got that oblique thing too, where maybe Grubb is. There's a bit of trying to manage him through that oblique, as it's maybe potentially still bothering him, and they're trying to not throw too much of a load on him. But it is kind of a guessing game on that as to the reasoning and I think it could be any number of about 5 or 6 things as to the reason why they didn't go to the run on that. And all of those I think are just about as valid as another on that side of it. I think to Janet's point, there's certainly over these last 2 losses, there's been a heavy amount of management and understanding, and maybe too much of so in their obsession and look at it and trying to be aware of this 3 games in 11 days thing and trying to keep their roster fresh through this brutal run of games through this early part of the year.
Yeah, I can buy it. Although it's with the way McDonald is doing things so far, it does sometimes feel like we're getting the runaround on these injuries a little bit. Like people just linger and linger and linger on these injury reports. People have noted, Ivan is still here. He's one of 2 coaches that survived the purge.
Well, and this team's as beat up as any team in the NFL right now. You're through 5 games and you're over half down essentially your defense at this point. You're down 2 right tackles. It's definitely not great for as early in the year as we are to be this decimated by injuries. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah. The silver lining, I guess, would be in 2013 when we won the Super Bowl. We had a lot of injuries that year, but almost everybody was back for the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the only guy who was really lost for the year that was was Sidney Rice. And by that point, I don't even know if he was that big of a loss. He wasn't really doing that much for us anyway. But we got Chris Clemens back. We got KJ Wright back. We got Percy Harvin back by the time the Super Bowl came around. So to a certain extent, I think you could look at that and go, okay, we had injuries, but at least we got them all back in time. And there's still a chance that happens this year. Nwosu's not out for the year. Abe might come back. I'm not super optimistic about him doing a lot when he does, but he will be back. Murphy will be back. Hall will be back. Woolen will be back. At least we're not getting hit with the season enders yet.
Agreed. No, it's not. No, those are the ones where you can certainly look at it and go, okay, this is going to get dark a little bit because there's no light here. There's no ability, but there are reinforcements coming. You just got to kind of keep yourself in that position to be able to make that run once those guys do at that point, as it is at the tough spot right now a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2 again. Do you feel a more zone game with Reek likely out? Well, the problem with that would be the meter only goes up to 100, right? You can't go beyond 100. So there's not really that much more zone I feel like we could do. I'm already kind of disappointed with how much we're running zone.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm where Brendan is on this. You're to my eyes, I watch so much of. I'm watching almost at the centerpiece zone coverage on the back end constantly. They're not willing to run man. They're not comfortable running man. When they run a blitz concept, one of the plays that drove me most crazy in this last game is they run one of their blitz concepts, but then they have Trey Brown in off coverage, 8 yards off, playing basically cover 3, and then the Giants just run a slant, which gives them basically a hot read to Daniel Jones to get out of the blitz. And you give them these easy outs with some of the zone coverages, the touchdowns that have happened, and the crossing routes that they've used with hitting our zone coverages, both the Lions and the Giants this past game for a touchdown, all out of zone. So I think feed me that they're already kind of living in zone as it is. Even if Reek was out there, I think they'd still be living in zone.
Yeah, and again, the teams that run man coverage the most in the league are only doing it about half the time. So we're not asking for the Seahawks to run man defense like 90% of the time. Nobody does that.
No.
But they should probably be one of the more man-happy teams in the league because they have 2 excellent man cover corners.
Agreed. And even in Trey Brown, that's a guy that's at his best press man, probably. And so put them in what they do best. Put the players in a position. And again, when you're having a game where you're not manufacturing anything with your stacked boxes, you're not confusing a lot of anything with Daniel Jones, well, then at least maybe lean into what your players do best on that day then, or what that they have as a skill in their back pocket. And team is not so far this year. And it's another little bit of a surprising aspect I had not expected here from McDonald.
Yeah, and I don't think you can say they're doing a great job running zone either when you see all these plays where you have 2 guys occupying the same zone. You've got people clearly out of position. So you can't say that they're even like holding strong in that regard, right? They're making mistakes just like they could potentially make mistakes in man. So I don't know what the hesitancy is.
I don't either. I really don't have an explanation for it.
Mike McGee, thank you for the $1.99. It's nice to see limited Geno hate so far this year. Well, we talked about this a little bit last week, but yeah, you're not seeing a lot of that lately. You're seeing a little bit of it. I saw some after this game. They always come out after a loss, though. I kind of feel like so. I'm not. It's not shocking, but
No.
people are figuring this out.
Yeah, I mean, and he's brought it to a place where it's pretty much undeniable, where you have to be pretty much just a completely blind idiot to not be seeing what he's doing. Even in this game, again, where there's, really no run game and the defense isn't doing much of anything, and he's got drops throughout the game and DK's fumble. Even at the end, he's bringing you down to go win the game. And if Jackson Smith and Jigba doesn't get a brutal drop on third down, my belief is that he takes you down and scores a touchdown there. I think you score. That's a first down. You're rolling. That was a huge drop in that moment, but that's what Geno always does. He's always on point. He's always doing what he needs to get done on his end of it. And did again this last game. And he's a great quarterback. Just kind of sucks that we're a little bit wasting this performance of Geno Smith right now because the offensive line is so bad, because the defense now looks a little bit in disarray. And I hope we don't. I hope we don't have an MVP-like caliber season from a Geno Smith, but we come to find that we weren't able to get anything done this year because these other parts couldn't hold up their end of the bargain.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was it could have been a legendary moment for Geno too, because that game was over in the fourth quarter. I was about ready to go start my post-game video early. I was about ready to okay, let's just go record this thing with 8 minutes left because we're not winning. If we had won that game, that would have been, it's not a playoff game. I get it. So you can't really say it's like the NFC Championship game against the Packers, but that would have been the stuff of legends, I think.
It would have been insane. He's had some great comebacks over the past couple of years, but that would have been right along in there with like that Detroit game where he had to come back to take you in overtime, and then he went back and drove down and got a touchdown right after he took you in overtime. I think it's about into that same equivalent point on a game where he had to play great on top of that. But he was again today in this. There's like one play I can really pick at, but otherwise other than that, I thought he was great again under pressure. The Jackson Smith touchdown they threw the back end zone where he's hit as he throws, stands tall in the pocket, takes hits. Couldn't ask for more from Geno. Really couldn't in what he's brought to the table.
Yeah, that JSN drop is going to live with me for a while too, because I know like when Metcalf drops a pass, of course I don't want him to drop the pass, but I tend to be a little bit more forgiving with that because I know what DK's impact is beyond just him getting the ball thrown at him, right? Because defenses live in terror of him constantly. So when he drops a pass or when he has a fumble, yeah, I'm upset about it, but I don't get really torn up about it because I know that his gravity is so big. He's still having a big positive impact on the game, but that's not the case for JSN. JSN's claim to fame is that he's money in the bank on third down. So I need him to catch that pass, man.
I do as well. I think it's kind of close to unforgivable. And, last week he had a back shoulder throw with the Detroit Lions where he doesn't get his head around on the throw. And quite honestly, in watching JSN through about a year and a half here, I've seen a good number of these and lapses in concentration, bad drops. You're a third down slot receiver. You need to convert those. That's what you're here to do. Like you say with DK, he's here to take the top off the defense, big play guy. Okay, get you a drop, but he gets you a 75-yard touchdown in addition to that drop. You ain't getting that from JSN on the upswing to the other side of it. So he's got to be the guy to move those chains. He's got to be the guy to make those catches. That's an out route where the defender's not hanging on you, not pulling on you. Last week on the back shoulder fade, the defender was not aware of the ball coming in. He just didn't turn his head around. You're into year 2, my man, now. You're a first-round pick. I'd like to start seeing a little bit more of why you were that first round pick and a little bit less of those drops. The people on this have got like Gio's playing like that. We got to have these guys pick each other up. I mentioned a lot. Lockett had a drop in this game. DK had a drop in this game. JSN had a drop in this game. Like these guys got to understand with the way this defense is in this shape, they've got to hold the line. They've got to carry the torch on this thing until that defense can get right. And right now, not exactly doing it with that kind of, performance in this game in that way. But it's bothering me a little bit with the JSN drops at this point. And I'm not soured on him. I have a lot of hope for him here still, but got to clean that up.
Yeah, I think after the game he was asked about it and he said concentration. It's like, what else are you concentrating on, man?
I don't know. I get if a guy's hanging on you, or there's a like almost a near pass interference, right? Or
Mhm,
like it's a bad throw and you gotta wheel back around. But Geno put the ball right where he needed to put it. You got two hands on it. The defender's behind you. There's separation on the route. Make the catch. Make
mhm.
the catch.
Yeah, even DK's drop, I think Banks was right there to punch the ball out, basically. Like I don't even know if they consider that a drop. I think they actually didn't give him the drop. Now, the fumble, that's a different thing. That's I mean, DK needs to learn that he's the biggest fumbler at wide receiver in the league, and everybody's going to be punching at the ball for the rest of his life when he catches it.
Yeah,
But like that drop is just a naked drop. He's out there on his own. It's a first down. We're keeping this drive alive, and I think we're winning this game. I think we win that game if he catches that pass.
agreed. 100%. So you're the guy that's here to be the moving the chains, and that means that those little short throws that aren't going to be high degree of difficulty kind of catch and throws. They're going to be short throws. You sitting in zone, you staying safe, but it's instrumental that you make those catches because that's your role in this offense is to keep those chains moving. DK takes the top off the defense. You keep the chains moving. That's your role. So
Mhm.
drop's got to this guy, not drop's got to go completely away, but you got to do this has got to not once a game thing here from JSN a little bit. In addition to
Yeah,
that,
he had the drop against the Patriots on 1st and 20. It would have been a first down. It's a pretty routine catch. There was
yeah,
that one.
yeah. And I think last year, going back, there was a couple last year. I can think back to Baltimore Ravens game on early drive on that where it's a third down. Geno puts another out route there where just drops
Mhm.
right up off the hands. Like, come on.
That's your job, man. That's what you're here to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same play last year in the Ravens game where you create the separation, out route throw, Geno puts in the right spot, just a purely putrid drop.
Mhm. Let's see here. Jeffrey, thank you for the $5. If the Chiefs roll right into the Super Bowl and win again, with teams playing them as the worst version of themselves every week, I'ma lose it. Yeah. I
That's
mean, think about it like this. Patrick Mahomes has not played one game this year, even close to as good as the game that Geno Smith played against the Patriots or against the Lions, and the Chiefs are 5-0. Like think about that. Like that whole team is picking up Mahomes right now. This is not Mahomes going out there and being Superman every week. This is that team. Every week a new player picks him up. So it can be done.
certainly can. And I think this is also a little bit representative of the way the NFL is in a bit of a tough shape all the way around, I think, from NFL teams' perspective. I mean, how many teams, Brendan, did we have after 4 weeks that were 2-2 throughout the league? You know, everything is highly, it feels like as much as ever in a place of parity. And I know that then allows a Chiefs team that's not in parity to still go win, but gives them less, combatants. They're the Super Bowl winning team. Everybody plays them like the Super Bowl winner. But if you're not playing your best football, and I know the Saints were playing good, but that Saints going into Arrowhead too. That's a tougher pull for them to go in there and try to win that game versus playing in the Superdome. But I hope not as well, Jeffrey. I don't want to see the Chiefs win again. I don't want to see constant shots to Taylor Swift and boxes throughout. I'm good. Like let somebody else get into this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I got some mixed news here. The injury report just dropped. So we want to do a little breaking news?
Sure.
All right. So Seahawks injury report. Niners has not dropped yet. Out. Now, these first two we knew. Murphy out. We knew that. Nwosu out. We certainly knew that. Also out. Reek Woolen. Not good. Not what you like.
Nope.
Questionable. Derek Hall. So a little bit better than I thought, actually. I didn't feel great about him yesterday. I'll take questionable for Derek Hall. Julian Love, questionable, although expected to play. Also questionable, but expected to play, Boye Mafe.
There we
And
go.
That's it.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, all things considered. So it's a short week. Not surprised with Woolen. Hard to get back on a rolled ankle like that, and you definitely worry about that getting worse. Throwing him out, running him out there on a short week. So you're giving him extra time to kind of heal after you get through this week on that one. Makes sense there, and not surprising. I do wonder how good Mafe and Hall are going to be in their injured state. And you still have Rashawn Jenkins with that club on his hand, Brandon. He couldn't wrap up last week at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really preventing him from getting anything done in the tackling aspect, and Julian's fighting through it too. So we win this game, it's going to be, limping our way through to get it done.
Mm. Yeah, I was expecting doubtful for Derek Hall at best, so I'll take questionable with him. But you're
Sure.
right; it's not what we needed. This is why I never stop looking at edge rushers in the draft. Like people say, "Oh, we don't need an edge rusher. We have this guy. We have that guy." I don't think you can ever have enough edge rushers.
Nor do I. And to your point on this, everybody's looking at maybe trade deadline deals to be an offensive lineman that people are looking to target. And you and I both, I think, been in the same camp where we were a little bit reticent to believe that there'll be an offensive line really of good quality available. But there will probably be an edge that you can go get. And Trevis Gibson came in here and he's not played well at all. You've moved
Yeah,
on from Tyus Bowser. We don't know what we're going to get from Uchenna going forward. I think there's a strong argument. I mean, I know I've mentioned it many times, but I would really be on the phone with the Carolina Panthers right now
mhm.
about Jadeveon.
Oh yeah,
I'd,
that's the
I'd,
one.
I'd
That's the
I,
one.
I would be just what can we do to make this realistic? Let's get this deal done. You guys need to pivot this forward. You need draft capital going forward. You need to build your team up. So let's take this out. What we got to do on this, and find
Yeah.
a way to get it done.
According to my research, he would only be due about $1.5 million the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Amen.
next year is a problem because he has that second year on his deal. That's a little bit harder to deal with, but it can be done.
Well, you bring him in and then move him after the year if you need to, and then reinforce the position at a cheaper rate that way. It'd be really just, I would look at it like, yeah, the second year's there on that deal, but you're not, because the bonus money's off the books at that point. It's only the base. So you can do whatever you want to do with it at that point, and there's no hit to you unless
Mhm,
he's got a roster bonus on that second year.
mhm. Right. So, yeah, I'm not going to pretend there's any silver lining to what's going on with Nwosu right now. But if Nwosu must die so that Jadeveon Clowney can live, I'm going to be pretty stoked about that.
Seahawks Highlander, man.
Hmm. Yeah, and at the end of the year, Nwosu comes back. If he's still got something left, then you've got Nwosu, you got Clowney, you got Hall, you got Mafe. Remember, Clowney can probably line up inside on some snaps as well. He's a bigger guy. He can definitely give you like those 4-eye snaps, I think, effectively.
100%.
Hmm.
100%. I think you can, he gives you, I think having those four edges is a smart way to go. Not to mention, are all four of those guys going to maintain their health through the whole season? Or by the end of the year, you're going to end up with all four of those guys at the 100% health if you had those four. Probably not. You're probably with just three if in a best case scenario. Somebody's going to probably get lost.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people over the last week have been upset about in retrospect, the Daryl Taylor trade because, oh, we could have used him right now. We could have used him right now. I don't really agree with that, but you're not going to be thinking about Daryl Taylor for a second if we end up with Clowney here. Like, yes, sign me up.
Yeah, the Daryl Taylor thing again just gets back to the people with a little bit of the inherent lack of understanding of what we're trying to do with this scheme and what we're trying to do differently from what the Bears are trying to do with their scheme. I mean, he's got 2 sacks on the year and 10 tackles. So let's not act like, he's destroying things. He's having a very well graded season, but he's an edge rusher that wants to run around the edge. That's Daryl Taylor's game. I think even his biggest benefactors would say, yeah, that's what he wants to do. He wants to get around that edge as quick as possible, use his quickness, use his dip, use his bend. But then that means at times you're letting the mobile quarterbacks get away. The Niners last week getting hit by Kyler Murray. You get a guy rushing off the edge like a Bosa that's out of control, trying to get to the quarterback. They leave their gap integrity coming off the edge, and they allow those quarterbacks then a way to get away, to get through. And so what McDonald wants to do with his edges a lot of times is that power edge kind of pass rush, where it's more about collapsing the pocket down as a whole and working together to collapse that pocket as a whole, rather than this each individual guy go win. Like under Carroll's whole defense, it was more about each individual guy go win up front. However you got to get it done, get it done. If you got to do spin moves and counters inside, do it. If you got to go run around the edge as fast as you can, go do that. This new scheme is a little more, tightened down on that in the details of things in that way. And so Taylor just was never going to fit to what Mike McDonald wanted from those edges.
Yeah, it's hard for me to be upset about that one, especially because it's all hindsight, right? We didn't know these players were all going to get hurt when we traded Taylor anyway. So like I know like Matty F. Brown's been on the warpath about the Taylor trade. He hated it at the time and he hates it even more now, but I just don't see it. I just don't think that would have worked.
I don't either. And again, it's not that he's lighting the world on fire in Chicago here. He's well graded and he's doing well for them in their defense. But one guy doing this in that defense does not mean that it's the equivalent over here in this defense. And again, he is the opposite of the type of player model that McDonald's looking for, right? McDonald wants big, he wants long, he wants stout, and he wants strong. Which of those four things is Daryl Taylor, Brendan?
He's a really nice guy,
Yeah.
He's
got cool hair,
well-mannered. He played college football at Tennessee. Tennessee seems like a cool state. Yeah, we're moving on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the Niners injury report actually just dropped. We have a list of players who are out. If you want to go ahead and go over that real quick.
Let's get it.
So you have Hufanga, which we knew about. That is a big loss, though. That is significant. They were counting on him this year, especially because of that thing you said about them liking to bring the safety up. He's the guy who is going to do some of that stuff. Jake Moody out, which we also knew about. Jordan Elliott out. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles out. And keep in mind, this is on top of McCaffrey being out, Greenlaw being out, et cetera, but not terrible. Not as bad as it could have been earlier this week.
No, they're not at full strength, which gives us, I mean, if they come in this, I think full strength, we're really going to struggle in this, but they are down. We got main guys, Hufanga, Hargrave's out for the year. No Christian McCaffrey is out. Those three, and those are pretty big losses right in there. A couple of the other ancillary guys you mentioned, including having a kicker out. Let's face it, they're bringing in a backup kicker. That impacts things heavily, especially when you're in a stadium like Lumen, which I've heard that there's maybe going to be potential of rain, but any kind of inclement then weather on top of a kicker that's a little shaky coming into this game from a Niner perspective gives us another inroad of maybe an advantage in this game versus what we're running on the other side of it. So no small thing on that. And they're at least a little weakened. So you're not getting them at that full juggernaut strength coming into this with McCaffrey and roll.
Yeah, and remember the 2019 game. 2019, the infamous Jadeveon Clowney game. They were lining up to kick the game-winning field goal in overtime were the Niners. Yeah. And Gold was out in that game. They had their backup kicker out there, and he kicked it into the locker room. So that's right. It can make a difference. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. No small thing at all. Mm-hmm. So, and it can inform, even if in this game with strategy, Shanahan, does he get informed at times of going for it on fourth down because he doesn't trust his kicker? Instead of being 32, I'm going to hit the field goal. No, I don't. It's a little too long for him in the stadium with these weather. Well, let's just keep trying to go for it. So maybe has a little bit of a larger effect in this game too.
Let me check something here real quick. Yeah, Jordan Elliott, he doesn't play a lot. He plays a little. He's like one of their rotational guys. So not a huge loss, but they need all the help they can get in the middle down there. So
they're light there and they're weak. They're weak in there as they've been in recent years, even when they're their full strength. Even the Hargrave and Collins there, it wasn't great. Like they had a lot of hopes for Collins. I think he's been okay for them as a pass rusher, but I think it's been a little light with him as a run defender at times in watching the games with him. So that's where you can get after this team, especially in the natural alignment with that wide nine. They're also weak. Get downhill up front on them and go downhill a lot, and I think you can find some yards.
Yeah, actually, in this Cardinals game, Elliott played half the game, 28 snaps, because of the Hargrave injury, probably. So that actually matters. That actually is more significant than I was initially giving it credit for.
Yeah, it's a position that they had because they had money on Hargrave at $18 million per year, and then Collins was like one of the real featured offseason defensive tackle signings. So they thought that they had, with that and what they already kind of had in house, that would be enough, and obviously they didn't have a lot of money to spend, right, Brendan, because they're in the end of the Super Bowl window. So it's not like they can just go out there and be throwing contracts all over the place. They have to be very tactical in who they give deals to, especially with all of the contracts they had with like McCaffrey wanting the extension, Trent Williams wanting the extension, Brandon Ayuk trying to get his deal done. It inhibited them from being able to address this. And maybe we'll be able to take advantage of that, Brendan, because it is legitimately a point of weakness, I think, for them at this point.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Magic Vlogs. Thank you for the $1.99. Man, being in that game was fun, but disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least you had some fun. At least you had some fun. I would not have had much fun.
I would have had a rough time in that stadium if I had to go into that stadium and drive all the way down there and show up early and watch that performance, especially from the defense, would have been tough.
You know how annoying it is to go to a game? You know how annoying it is to go to a football game in 2024?
I don't know. It's not at the head of my list of wanting to do it anymore. It's been
Yeah.
and going in there. There's a couple things that have been less enjoyable about for me in the stadium experience. On top of what we saw this last week, which is that our stadium is slowly and slowly and slowly getting quieter and quieter and quieter.
Yeah. Yeah. Football players really do have an extra obligation to their paying fans, I feel like, because of how annoying it is to go to a game. Like at least baseball, you go there, you're kind of there to just chill out most of the time. It's more relaxed environment, more relaxed setting. And even
Sure.
if the team doesn't do well, you can you can get good food, you can just kind of chill out. But football, it's different.
It is, and I think that your point on this, there was a lack of intensity last week. Was it that they overlooked the Giants? Was it that they were on the shortened week and everybody's bodies were just tired, and that malaise kind of set in? Whatever the reason is for the excuse and reason we saw it, it was there, and everybody saw it in the stadium. Everybody could feel it. It's part of the heavy amount of frustration from fans. Is it's one thing to lose from the X's and O's standpoint. It's another thing to lose because this play or that play comes up and becomes a game-changing play when it was a fairly even game all the way around. It's another thing when you feel like, especially defensively in this game, you don't feel like your players were playing at their maximum intensity, that they were out there flying around and giving everything they could. And that's the part that's hard for me as a fan to excuse in a player on that, where you have 17 games in a season. I know your bodies get beaten down. I know you're hurting, but you're also played to go out there and perform at a certain level in that way of how much you're trying, not succeeding, but trying. And it does become clear at times when you can sense from players a lack of not complete. I watch other games, and you watch that Seahawks defense and watch some of the other defenses throughout the league this past week. And I don't know about you, but I felt that there was a stark difference in the flying around to the ball, the buy-in level that I was feeling from players on other defenses. I wasn't feeling that from the Seahawks defense at all, from tackling on down to how ferociously they take on blocks this past week.
Yeah. I there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of that. And it's disappointing too, right? Because I think one of the big reasons why last year was the last year of Carroll was that there were games where the team felt like they weren't trying,
Yeah.
which you couldn't really say in previous years. They
Yeah.
lost, they had bad losses, but it always felt like they were trying.
Agree.
I didn't think you could say that about some of the games last year. And this last game, I think you'd be hard pressed to say they were giving maximum effort.
I agree. I just don't. I don't think it's just a matter of going, well, injuries and this. Since this Giants team is not a good offense. I think they're going to end up the year with 4 or 5 wins when it's all said and done. And to have them take it to you like that, where they wanted it more than you wanted it at home, disappointing to see. But it's also a big part of the checking of expectations coming out of this game a little bit, because that intensity thing is kind of a big thing. Beyond you didn't do this, you didn't do that, could have put the players in a better position to succeed. Not having the players up to ready to play speaks to not necessarily Mike McDonald's inability to get them to play, but then maybe he doesn't have all the right guys here, all of the right buy-in guys on it. And, I watch guys like Draymond Jones at times on snaps, and I go, for $17.5 million a year, you're not giving out max effort. You're not doing everything you could. I'm watching him softly set an edge and be unbothered to get off the block to go make a play where the ball's being run right around the side of him. It's kind of a little bit of that you're seeing across the board a little bit at times.
All right. Thank you for the Dono Magic Vlogs. We have Feed Me More Seahawks with the $2. Thank you. Broncos are turning into a top defense. Great win. Yeah. These Broncos, man, not such a meaningless win after all, as it turns out. They have a legitimately, I'd say, top 5 at least defense in the NFL right now.
Yeah, Dolphins got to win too. So strength of schedule looking, a little bit better. And yeah, surprising to see what it almost doesn't make sense what the Broncos are able to accomplish defensively speaking and how they're able to get it done. And boy, you do think a little bit about what could have been, Brendan, because Seahawks were trying at the time when they signed Draymond Jones to both sign Draymond Jones and Zach Allen. And the Broncos ended up spending a little more money on Zach Allen than we could afford because we had spent the money on Draymond. But boy, you look in retrospect, and what if we had pivoted to Zach instead of Draymond on the other side of it, because he's been a much better player for Denver than Draymond's been for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can say that right now, Geno Smith is the one quarterback who cracked that Denver defense so far this year, right?
I would say, yeah.
Certainly not Justin Fields, not Baker Mayfield, not Aaron Rodgers. The great Aaron Rodgers couldn't do it.
It's true. It's very true. So it's something worth little feather in the cap on that one. I agree.
That Denver defense probably got Robert Saleh fired.
I would say that that's that game as much as ever. I think what I've heard though, Brendan, is that Woody Johnson was a ambassador, and so he was over there in, they're doing the England game basically. So he got embarrassed in front of all of his English friends, I guess, and that set him off. Because when he was the ambassador last time, it was his brother that hired Saleh. So he didn't even hire Saleh. So he's just completely emotional owner, and it's bad ownership, man. We talk about what makes great teams and what makes bad teams, and why we a lot of times have the faith in the team we do is we have still really good ownership. You still have really capable ownership, and you can see bad ownership. You can see it in these kind of situations with the Jets, be it how they draft quarterbacks, how they fire coaches, how they hire coaches, the coaches that they go to bring in there. It's something you see time and again. Is they're a bad organization. They haven't sniffed close to a Super Bowl since the Namath era, and there's good reason for that. They've earned that.
Yeah. Did you just real quick here, off topic of this stream real quick, but I want to ask, do you think it's a good idea to fire Saleh?
No. Because the defense is playing great, and the defense has played really well. When you brought him in and you bring a defensive headed coach in that way, then you're bringing that guy in to make sure that his defense is handling business. And then that general manager on the other side then has to offsuit that in the way that he's building the offensive roster up, the offensive coaches that are brought in. I'm not sure, for instance, Hackett was Saleh's choice. Was Hackett Saleh's choice, or was that Aaron Rodgers' choice?
Yeah,
I think the head coach,
we know the answer to that.
We know the answer. So is the head coach putting together his coaching staff, or is it? And so when you start to pull one arm behind a coach and be like, be successful with this arm pulled behind your back, it doesn't really work that way. And Aaron Rodgers has gotten himself now a good amount of coaches kind of axed here for and I'm not blaming it fully on him with it. It's as much the bad ownership that we come down to on this. I mean, it's the Aaron Rodgers deal being done when it was done because you poorly drafted, because you didn't set the stage for those rookie quarterbacks twice over, be it Sam Darnold and Wilson, to have the stage set for them to be successful when they walked in. You set them up to fail. That's how you did it. And much in the same way with Saleh here, you set him up in so many ways to fail, and it's happened. But that's why they will continue to be a bad organization and continue to make bad decisions. So no, I think that they should have just stayed with them and rolled out this year. You gain nothing by moving off of them. Jeff Ulbrich is not going to turn around this team. Aaron Rodgers getting more power is not going to be for the betterment of the Jets this season.
Yeah.
It's emotional. It's a reactive move. And I don't think the Jets are going to be winning anytime soon.
Yeah, I think Saleh is going to be a good coach. Like the Jets thing, it didn't work out, obviously, but it's very easy to see why. I think Saleh will land on his feet, and if he ever gets another chance to be a head coach, I think he'll have success. I'll put it to you that way. So I don't like it either. I understand that there's a lot of urgency because this is it. This is the year the Jets win, or it's probably over. Rodgers will retire, and then they're back on the carousel of trying to find a quarterback, which we know they're never going to get off of.
Yeah.
They're going to be trading for Patrick Mahomes when he's 58 years old, probably at this rate. And
now they're going to throw us a first-round pick for Geno Smith.
Yeah, that could happen too. Former Jet Geno Smith leads the league in passing yards. Former Jet Sam Darnold, 5-0. I mean, it's starting to look like we need to relegate the Jets to like college football or something, because there's something very wrong there.
Can you imagine if Knicks goes down and then Zach Wilson takes over and then he starts lighting it up, and you have all three of them at the very same time out there doing damage in the league, and the Jets are looking at him like,
yeah, people should learn something from that, right? People should learn something from that, but they probably won't.
This is one of my things that get stuck in my craw, Brendan, because we have so many discussions about this in quarterback position, and the mentality is proliferated where people want to just say over and over again, just go get the QB, just go get the QB, just go get the QB. And you can find all of these models of organizations who take that very trek, and it fails spectacularly for them. And yet it doesn't change a lot of people's spot on it, because then what they'll tell you is they'll go, well, then just draft a quarterback every year. Just take one every year. It's like, what are we doing here? There's no intelligent application of when we're deciding or not deciding. It's just do it this way automatically constant, even though there's all these failures of teams doing that. From the Panthers with Bryce Young, and just go down through the list. And it's even, to me, it's like, you hear about the New England Patriots right now. New England Patriots are so smart about holding Drake May off and giving him a year to develop in there. But then you got the players out there bitching him, almost going to be a mutiny in the locker room, a mutiny in the locker room. Because the players can't be patient enough to understand what the plan is here from the organization. And if I was the head coach in that locker room, I'd put all those players in there and I'd say, you know what? You all need to shut the F up. I run this team and I'm here for what's to do for the long term of this team, what's best. And the best is not to put Drake May out there. I don't care what you guys think you're seeing at practice. You don't know better than me as a coach. And they're not going to do it. They're going to get forced to out there and play him.
Yeah.
And he's going to get beat up and he's going to get probably broken. And then the fans, then all those same players that are in the mutiny will be like, well, I didn't really unnamed sources in the locker room want Drake May. No, suddenly there's no more unnamed sources ready to make any notes. It's like, oh, where are you guys all at now when it goes to hell? So
yeah,
it's what I also call, Brendan, a market opportunity for us when we look at our quarterback position going forward, because that's what this is all about, is pushing it forward to how does this affect the Hawks and their outlook of it. And we've got to look at it smarter than simply go get that guy. It's got to, you got to expand your brain outside of that point, because it is the pathway to failure. It's like going to the dark side in Star Wars or something, fear leads to, fear of not having the quarterback leads to selecting the quarterback, and you'll get the bad quarterback because of it. It's like one always seems to lead to the other. Do it smartly, do it intelligently. Chiefs a couple years ago when they got Mahomes, did they do that out of desperation? Because you got to go draft a guy, Or they tactically said, this is the guy we want. We got this guy to back him up. We're going to sit him for a year. We'll move up in the draft to go get him, and you go get him. Now, I know it worked out spectacularly for him, but it's also a smart, beyond what Mahomes became, it was a smart decision on their part to jump in that way for a guy that they truly believed in.
Yeah, and by the way, my understanding is that Drake May is starting this week, so they've already given in.
And it's just like, shut up, players. Shut up. I know you want to win. I understand you might look at this and go, well, the division's open, and if we just have a little bit better quarterback play, and I know Jacoby Brissett's been crap. I get it. But Drake May is not going to be ultimately better at the end of the day. And you're going to, it's about developing him. That's what we're doing here, right? It's not about winning today, right? It's about developing the rookie quarterback. And it's a league-wide horrific problem right now. And it's one that is a very slow lesson that just does not want to be learned.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the Chiefs, who you just mentioned a moment ago, Janeth Kumar, thank you for the $2. Geno on the Chiefs would be legendary tier QB play. I think you could make a pretty good argument that Geno's been better than Mahomes so far this year. Like, Mahomes has really not had a trademark Mahomes game yet.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fair way of putting it. I think Mahomes is also dealing with a little bit of inadequacies that Geno doesn't have to necessarily deal with in certain ways. He's got better pass protection, but then on the other side of it, Rashee Rice goes down to a season-ending injury. The rest of those guys they brought in there through the years, from Kadarius Moore to Sky Moore, everybody in between, has not really worked and developed for them. So he doesn't have real separators out there at the receiver position right now. He's kind of trying to get it by, and Kelsey's 36 and he looks like he's on his last legs. It gets hard when you don't have the playmakers on the outside to get it done too. Even Mahomes needs those guys.
Yeah, I know Kelsey had to come back for the three-peat, right? Like, you got to come back for the three-peat. But man, he really should have just retired. He's already like there's this TV show on FX. I think it's called like Grotesque. He's starring in it. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Commercials for it. Like, you got to do that stuff after you retire, man. It's not even like a goofy cameo in a comedy movie. It's a serious horror themed TV show that he's doing. It's like, man, you needed to either retire or wait another year on that one. And sometimes with him out there, it's actually like sometimes the numbers are okay, but it's a mess out there with him sometimes.
Well, he doesn't look in shape. I mean, and look, you win 2 Super Bowls, you have every right to come back with a nice little gut and be like, look, I just drank beer this offseason and went on tour with my girlfriend and chilled out and shot this television show. But he wasn't working out in his best. And if you want to keep playing at that age, you've got to stay on it. You look at Tony Gonzalez and even his body at the end. He had that thing without an ounce of fat, and he was absolutely making sure he's taking care of his body, the ultimate. Shannon Sharp at the end, when he was still at the Ravens, deep into his career at the tight end position, still keeping his body in great shape and able to go out there and perform. And I just don't see that same thing from Kelsey. I think he's lived his life a little bit. He's done what he's done, and he's had a great career, and he's played a lot of extra games, and he's earned a Hall of Fame, point. But it does look like it's at that finished point, which understandable at his age. You wouldn't expect him to go out there and be as dynamic as he was when he was 27, 28 years old.
I mean, his great skill as a player, admittedly, is reading zone defense and finding the hole in the zone, I think, which he can
Yeah.
still do that, but man, sometimes he looks like he doesn't even look natural running out there. It's like almost like a baby deer sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just so lopsided the way he runs. But
He used to be
yeah.
a yak guy too. He used to give you more kind of yak after the catch kind of guy, and that's pretty much all gone away as well.
Right. But yeah, I think you put Geno on the Chiefs, you'd lose some stuff, but you'd also gain some stuff. I think you'd come out pretty good. I mean, you got Andy Reid over there, man. The great one. The one of the all-time great kings of making quarterbacks look much better than they are. Remember all the random guys the Eagles would cycle through back in the day?
Oh yeah.
Coy Detmer, Ty McMahon, or what was it? McMahon? I think it was Jim, not Jim McMahon, of course, but there was a McMahon in there, Kevin Cobb, AJ Feely, and then they go everywhere else and they're terrible. They can't play.
Yeah. It's Nick Foles in there too. Yeah, he gets the most out of his QBs. He knows how to get those guys in great shape. And if Geno's on the Chiefs, I think they very well would be still undefeated at this point in time if he was running with them. So
All right. Kirk Stemmer, thank you for the $5. With next year's cap situation and how both of you say the team is not yet built how McDonald wants it, why are you wanting to trade draft capital? I don't think Clowney would cost that much draft capital. The Panthers, they're just trying to get out of that second year of that contract at this point. They're a terrible team. They know it. They need to blow it up. They need to rebuild. And I think you could call them up and say, hey, we'll bail you out of that second year of the Clowney deal. And you don't have to give up very much at all.
Yeah, the draft capital we're talking about here, Kirk, is at worst probably like a 4th round pick and maybe even like a 5th round pick as far as the flip goes. And that's very, for me, am I willing to do that to reinforce the ranks this year and how that can help you on top of with Clowney being under contract for another year, you now maybe are able to cinch up your edge group completely moving forward into next year, keeping in mind you're very likely at that point to cut Uchenna Nwosu no matter what. So you'll be down to Derek Hall and Boye as it is. That's already on the books for how that would probably go if this is just going to fit to form and go through the rest of this offseason, where you can save a lot of money off of Uchenna's deal if you go down that route. So I think it makes sense on a couple of different levels from that aspect there, Kirk. As well as as far as the cap situation goes, I went back and looked at it again. Over the Cap has updated themselves for 2025. If you look at it 4 weeks ago, Over the Cap had us at like negative 25 million. They currently have us with all of the contract restructures and DK's deal redone through. You currently are sitting on $6 million of cap space for next year. You've got $13 million of cap space right now. Partial amount of that will roll over. I ran the numbers a couple of days ago on looking at a new DK and Geno deal. Geno at about $47.5 million and DK at about $33.5 million. And running those deals and running those numbers and looking at other receiver and quarterback deals in the first year cap hits of those deals, you're going to save on a new deal for DK $5 million on his current cap hit for next year in 2025. You'll also save $5 million even on the even at $47.5 million per to Geno's new deal on an extension of 4 years. You would still be able to save $5 million on what he currently accounts for on the cap. So there's $10 million there. There's the $6 million that exists. There's probably about the $8 million you're going to roll over. So right there out the gate, you got about $22 million of cap space. You then have the Uchenna deal, which creates a ton of space that you're going to probably get out from under that. Walk me through on a couple of these deals, Brendan. We got there's a couple of
Noah Fant. We could get out of
Noah Fant's a no-brainer on that one.
Draymond. Maybe.
Draymond Jones. So those three between Draymond Jones, Uchenna Nwosu, and the third guy on that, Noah Fant, that you put that together with the $20 million of cap space, kind of wrap that all together. And now you can get the other deals done for those other guys we talk about. Because remember now on my deal here, I've already got the deal done for DK. I've already got the deal done for Geno. Now with that remaining money, I can get the deal done for Mafe. I can get the done. If I want to do Tariq Woolen, I can get that deal done. And yes, even Charles Cross in addition. And yes, I will still have money left over to be able to operate my normal business. Will I be able to go wild and crazy out in free agency? Probably not. But will I be able to sign up all of our foundational guys and still be having plenty of space? Yes. So I know that it looks weird right now, 2025 for the space, but we actually do have good functional space for cap room into next year.
Right. And the Clowney trade would not drastically affect the cap next year because, again, the remaining money due to him this year, I believe, is $1.5 million.
Correct. And you can always adjust the deal to with Clowney on that other side, right? With the void or something, because 26, 27, you're currently top 3 in cap space. So there's also that part of it where there's ability to massage numbers out into 26, 27 because of how well you've set the stage in those years with how few contracts you have on the books.
Right. Remember, we got Carlos Dunlap in 2020 for a 7th-round pick and a backup offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys that you're trying to trade for usually do not cost as much as you think because
No,
teams
they
are
don't.
just trying to get rid of them, especially mid-season when the team is garbage. Right. And that I know that Panthers team has won a game now, but they know they're no good. They know they're not winning anything.
Yeah. And they know they need to build up draft capital to reinforce, if they want to go get another quarterback now and you're looking at a package, they're going to need to, go that route with it here. So I wouldn't shock me in the least if they start to try to build up their cap. And if they're not winning now, what's the point of having Clowney? Clowney was a move about, we think we can win this next year. And if not, then I think you do go this other way with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2 yet again. Is Cam Young coming back this week with Murph out? I didn't see him on the injury report, but I don't think he's been elevated yet. So he's probably not in football shape.
Yeah, I would imagine you're probably still 2 weeks out on Cam, I would imagine.
Yeah. It is worth noting he fully participated in practice every day this week. So he's getting close. But it was never going to happen on a short week, I don't think.
No, I would be surprised if we do see Cam out there this young. Possible, but I mean, because they can bring him back once you elevate him off the pup, you can bring him anytime. But maybe by the next game, next game would make sense with a long extra week there.
Yeah, and I mean, don't expect him to do that much. I mean, Hankins is actually playing fairly well. Maybe not so much in this recent game, although I didn't think it was as bad as some people were giving him crap for. Like PFF killed him. I didn't think it was that bad.
No, he's been really good in other games, and it just wasn't as much where he had been.
Yeah, but when Murphy's back and Hankins is out there, don't expect Cam Young to play a ton.
No, it'd be more of a load balance thing. I think part of why you see Hankins having an issue here is he's now through the third game of him playing significant snaps, and that guy is 33 years old. It's a little bit like Jaron on that, where it's like you do want to get those guys in that pocket of the snap count because they can get, probably tired out pretty quickly at that age.
Right. And, Murphy's on the other end of that, right? He's 21. He's probably not fit to play, 50 plus snaps a game.
Agreed. Yeah.
Long live the king. Thank you for the $5. I think like this, McDonald was a high ceiling hire. We probably win against New York with a Dan Quinn, but we're building for a high ceiling, not floor. Yeah, some of the Dan Quinn stuff this week after that Giants game, some people talking about the Dan Quinn stuff is just like, man, I know you were the same people who freaked out when we were talking about hiring Dan Quinn in the offseason. You are the same people. Do not bring that to me right now.
Yeah, there's a rush from some of the fan base to get to a reactionary state on this that I don't quite understand myself. We were touching a little bit of this at the top of the show, and that is that there's this weird rush by NFL fandoms to get to a conclusion. And so that then you can be the first person to sort of say, see how smart I was to be the first to say that this thing was the thing that was going to happen. And so you get all these people that are just spinning themselves as fast as they can to get to a point of saying, shouldn't have fired Carroll. Shouldn't have fired. Like you start hearing some of that too from this last game, right? Those people who it's those people that will say that, and they'll come in the last two games, the Lions and this, and they'll come into my chat and say that, but then they're deathly quiet through the first 3 weeks. And it's the same people that will do this with the Geno stuff, where they're quiet throughout this first year with Geno. Geno goes out and has his first bad game, and here they come in loud as they can be, spamming my chat, saying it over and over again. And I really think under new coaching staff in this first year, more than ever, people have got to be more in a pocket of less about reaching ultimate conclusions about this team and more enjoy the process of it, unfurling and coming together and, processing through, because you're probably going to be likely wrong if you're trying to reach certain conclusions 5 games into the season. You're going to be made to look kind of foolish when we get down to the final year. And so I don't know what this is as far as this pull from fans to should have made a mistake here with this. This is why you can't sign Jake Key to a contract extension. This is why Geno Smith's not the guy. There's always this just knee-jerk want to push at times from some out there. And I go, let it just go and unfurl out. And if Dan has success with Washington, it doesn't guarantee that he was going to have the same success here with Seattle if he came to this. It's about the conditions. It's about where you're going. And I think that Long does bring up a good point, and that I think that there is more of the upside if we want to break that down to it and what McDonald brings versus I think what a Dan Quinn does bring. But Yeah, it's weird. It's weird some of the reactions you get out of these games where people just jump to these ultimate conclusions of certainty of where they're at. Where you're like, how do you get to that spot off of just this one game off this? And you have others where it's not been that way. And I don't get it. It's kind of a new fandom thing that I don't remember as being as much a part of things 20, 30 years ago in the sport.
Yeah, yeah. The Dan Quinn stuff that I heard from some people this week really set me off because when I talked about the Seahawks hiring Dan Quinn in the offseason, I wasn't even that against it. I didn't love it, but I didn't think it was all bad. Like I thought, there's some good stuff here. People freaked out. They were like, "Oh, if you were going to do that, just keep Carroll. That's the worst hire ever. He's terrible." And these same people are now like, "Oh, I guess we should have hired Dan Quinn because Washington's 4-1." Even though they're 4-1, despite their defense not being any good, they're 4-1 because they have the best offense in the league. Like, does Dan Quinn have a lot to do with that? I don't think so.
Yeah. What Dan Quinn have to do with Jane Daniels being magical and having
Yeah.
one of the best starts to of a rookie quarterback that we've seen in the last 25 years? Like that, it's like, how much is that? Does he have that effect on that? I don't know on that. And I do agree with that sentiment on it. If you were going to go to Dan Quinn, there's no point in firing Coach Carroll. Because what is Dan Quinn going to do differently than what Coach Carroll's doing?
Yeah. Well, I guess the one thing with Quinn and the one thing that people, I think, don't give him credit for is how good he is at building a staff. Like when he was in Atlanta, that staff was stacked. He put together Shanahan. You had Raheem Morris on that staff. You had McDaniel, I think, on that staff. So many guys would go on to become either head coaches or really successful assistants in the NFL. I give him credit for that. That's the one thing he could probably do that Carroll would not. But
do you like Cliff Kingsbury for Geno Smith?
I mean, probably not that, but would he have found somebody more suited to Geno Smith? Because he found somebody suited to Jaden Daniels. I don't think he hired Kingsbury because he just thinks Kingsbury will be really great no matter what. He hired him because it's a fit for Jaden Daniels.
Certainly possible. Certainly definitely possible there.
But yeah, it's like as somebody who runs a YouTube channel talking about the Seahawks, and you do it as well, you're trying to get people to look at things logically and rationally, and it's just so disheartening when people freak out after every single game, every single play, even.
Yeah,
calm down, knock it off.
Yeah, it's chill out. I get we're all emotionally wrapped up in it, and I'll be one of the people at the front when there's an ultimate conclusion to be reached, like we did with Carroll last year. You and I didn't get to the spot lightly. It's where people would give us a hard time at points on our opinion and how hard we drove on that. But we drove as hard as we did on that because it was not an overnight evaluation. We didn't just have a collection of 3 games over a given season to arrive at the point where we're out, we're done, this needs to go. It was that this was something going on for years. It was a trend that was not changing. There was no hope that it was going to change going into the future. And so the Seahawks had to do something. And that's why we reached that conclusion at that point. But that's not the same thing of what I see people reaching on some of these conclusions where, number one, they've got pre-built biases that you can completely see, because I'll see, and you see the same thing. I see the same usernames. It's like these people will think, I think that like, they come in and they have a comment that's kind of out of pocket, that's not right, not wrong. And then they come back 3 weeks later and it's like, they think that you aren't aware of what they had said before. It's like, well, where were you for 3 weeks when this guy was going off? Like, where's your intellectual honesty on this one? And it's like, well, it doesn't exist because I've got a pre-based bias to this player. I'm anti-DK, or I don't like Geno, or I don't think that they should have moved on from Coach Carroll. And they just get dug in. And it's not, I don't think they're doing themselves any favor in enjoying the sport by doing it that way. I think you're going to just spin yourself into frustrating circles and be angry all the time. And if that's the way you want to enjoy your fandom, go for it. I won't knock you on that. But I do think it just isn't for the betterment to just always be ready to have that knee-jerk reaction to things as far as big picture items go. Oh, we didn't get the right coach. Oh, we can't do this to this guy because he had this one game where he did this. He's garbage. He doesn't deserve to be here. I don't know. I don't think that's the pathway to a successful organization, is being constantly knee-jerk reaction like that.
Yeah, I don't want to be like Cowboys fans, right? That's how Cowboys fans are.
Exactly.
No one wants to be like Cowboys fans.
That's right. Got to be patient. Got to give it time.
Feed me more. Thank you for the $2. Schemes take a while, aka Vikings, Broncos, Saints, and that is true. What I would say to that though would be, I didn't really feel like, I don't feel like you're even trying to implement the scheme. I didn't see attempting and failing to implement the scheme against the Giants. I saw us doing the same things we would have done under Carroll.
Yeah, I agree with Brandon on this one. Feed me. I think your point's absolutely right. So I don't want to make it not seem that. But if you look at the Vikings last year with Flores, he didn't have the talent on that defense, yet he was willing to dial those blitzes up to try to make something happen. And they got beat at times by a lot of points. They had some offenses that were able to rip them apart, but they were also able to shut some really good offenses down, like the Niners, like Brock Purdy, by taking this approach. And so it's one the Broncos did the same thing last year, in my opinion, and now they're getting the benefits of that on the other side of it. So back to Brendan's point on this is that I'd like to see more of getting back to the heart of what this scheme was supposed to be when we brought it in, less of the players are just not picking it up fast enough. Well, run it, give them, put mistakes up on tape that they can correct then on the off, during the week at that point, but don't run the same stuff we've been running because that's not going to work either. That's no pathway to success on the other side of it.
Yeah, the Broncos had to give up 70 points in a game to get to where they are now, maybe.
That's it. And I'm okay. Look, I don't want to see 70 points in the game, but if we're doing that, you and I can very cleanly see, is it a 4-man front you're showing and you're dropping back into heavy zone? Are you bringing stacked boxes? Are you trying to confuse quarterbacks, or are you making the game pretty easy on them? And I don't think any Seahawks fan can look at the way the Goff played or the Jalen Jones played the past couple of weeks. Two quarterbacks who at the forefront you want to make uncomfortable before you get to any individual specific thing tactically and how you want to attack them. You want to make them uncomfortable first and foremost. And we did not make either of those two quarterbacks uncomfortable, and especially by how we defensively called the game. And that part doesn't make any sense. You went down not swinging. You kind of went down on your knees.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the part that bugs me here. But thank you, Feed Me More. Many donations from Feed Me More on this stream.
Thank you, Feed Me. Appreciate you.
Varman, thank you for the $1.99. I think what he's trying to say, I think he's basically trying to say he thinks Abe Lucas will get cut next year, which if he doesn't get out on the field at some point this year is probably the case. I think that's what he's trying to convey here. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either on that one with it, Varman. It kind of all went together. I do think you're right. If he doesn't get on the field, Varman, Lucas is going to be, this will be the last year. There's no reason for the team to hold out a third season on that. And even if they did hold him at that point, you're certainly going to be going and looking at a de facto starter in front of him, legitimate one draft or not. So, you're not relying on him in the least if he can't get out there this year. It is a bit make or break.
Yeah, I mean, you already were kind of planning for this possibility this year when you signed George Fant. Now, unfortunately, that went sideways too. But I think there's an understanding here. And I'm kind of tired of getting the runaround on this because months ago we were told, oh, he's going to be ready for training camp. And then he wasn't ready for training camp. Oh, he'll be ready for the preseason. Not ready for the preseason. Oh, he'll be ready for the regular season. And here we are now being told that he probably won't be ready until mid-season. It's like, come on, guys, knock it off.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of reason to be this cloak and dagger about it. I don't understand why they can't just be upfront with what he is dealing, what's going on, and the fans can better understand it rather than rely on something that very well may be an empty option there for them. If it is some chronic issue that was like a Hail Mary surgery, which if he's not playing this year, that's what that was in retrospect. You could have just told us that and we've been fine. You try to sign George fans, you try to do something to reinforce it. I get it. So, but yeah, they have been a little bit, quiet with this one.
Cutting Lucas doesn't save you a ton of money though, so it's not like that's going to change anything.
Yeah, it's and that's where again he might be on the roster because it's going to be relatively cheap, but then that's just where you don't rely on him like you even this year you relied on him kind of. You'd have to kind of go, okay, first round pick, a right tackle. It'd be kind of like how you'd have to do it a little bit, or a second round pick to a right tackle. Like it'd be that kind of, you got to actually put some significant resources back to this position now, rather than trotting out a George Fant or something out there to hope that can get that done.
There are going to be some guys in this draft too, I think. They're right tackle prospects. I like some guys already, I'll tell you.
And George is another guy that's going to be cut, by the way. That's another $5 million you save with him as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Remember, Lockett's retiring, probably.
That was another deal we forgot on that, which is more savings on top of that as well.
Yeah, and if he doesn't retire, he'll be released. There's no way he's back on that $30 million cap hit.
No, I don't see it either.
Feed Me More, thank you for the $2 again. I think Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio were lazy hires. Those are both Eagles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Fangio's still fine. Kellen Moore, yeah, his star is in the dirt right now, but I don't mind the Fangio one.
Kellen's definitely had a starter. diminish, going to the Chargers, getting nothing done there with Justin Herbert, really, and then going now to the Eagles and having a hard time. I will say with Kellen Moore, though, he is a guy that was renowned with the Cowboys when he was there of having the offense work really well, but the Cowboys just got tired of him not being willing to run the football. With the Eagles team, Jalen Hurts is not a high volume quarterback. So when you talk about pairing a Kellen Moore to Jalen Hurts, I don't think that that's a good pairing. What they should have brought in was more of a run-centric kind of guy around Hurts. But they keep trying to convince themselves, of course, that he can be that guy to sling it because they paid him that money. And when you pay the guy the money, you want him to be kind of carrying the load, right? I don't want to pay you $50 million a year to have you handing the ball off and run a read option and throwing, 9 routes. I need you to be able to make all the throws. So that's where the Eagles got themselves talking to Hurts being more than what he is. And that's not as much Moore's fault. I think Moore can still be a okay coordinator in this league, but he has to go to that, pass eccentric offense. If Moore was here, for instance, he'd probably be in hog heaven with Geno and stuff, because Geno be able to roll it all. But I'm on the other side of that with the Fangio. I'm not as sure of Fangio on this one, because that Eagles team defensively has not necessarily looked good. They've poured a lot of assets. And the thing with it too is he can't say, well, we don't have the talent. They put a lot of assets to that defensive side of the ball in the draft in many recent years. So to have them performing where they're performing, it doesn't speak to Fangio continuing to update his scheme. And something that stands out to me is while his coverage schemes with the cover 2 shells really at the forefront of a lot of this stuff, he didn't do as much stuff to me with the fronts. He didn't do as much kind of cool things up on the front 7th side as what he was doing on the back side when you look at it. And I think that that's being exposed a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he's not done a great job. I don't think the hire was bad, though. I think it was a decent hire at the time.
Sure.
It just isn't working great. And I think there is, the pendulum's always swinging, right? The things that worked previously aren't working now,
It's constantly in a state of flux, man. It's never stagnant for a 7-year period. Dominant this year, you'll be dominant 5 years from now. You got to constantly develop with it and evolve your scheme with it.
It wasn't that long ago Fangio defenses ruled the league, and maybe that's turning.
Could very well be. I think the cover 2 shell side of it's still a part, and the flipping coverages side of it, it's like take what still works, but also now working extra stuff around the stuff that works. And with him, I think he was more about more often than not trusting those fronts, trusting especially the light boxes to stop the run at times. Not because you have the cover 2 shell, you're not bringing that safety down, so it's cover 2s. You're wanting the lighter box to stop the run. That gets harder if teams start to become more committed to running the ball, which they have become now as a counter to the cover 2 shells. So it is push and pull a little bit on that.
Seth Kialoa, thank you for the $4.99. The play calling needs to be more balanced with pass and run calls, which will happen. Give it time. It's a process. Grubb took ownership post-game. Yes, he did. Very much so. More ownership than I've seen any Seahawks coach take in quite some time.
And McDonald's done that as well, which I like with this coaching staff in general. I do like them taking that and less of making excuses. So it's good to see, and I think it's well said on your part, Seth. This all is going to take a little bit of time. That's that part of that patience that we got to build in here and give it that time. Take a deep breath, even on tough losses, and go, okay, there's going to be some of these tough days, but once we get to the end of this tunnel, there will be a light.
Yeah, and, to be clear, at least in this modern NFL, I love passing the ball. I think a pass-first offense is the way to go. I think games are won and lost by the passing attack, so don't get it twisted. I like it, but you've gone too far when you've lost me, right? Like you're Ryan Grubb is Francis Ford Coppola, and he's directing Megalopolis right now. He's got to, somebody's got to get in there and pull him back a little bit.
Yeah, you ended up with a 4-to-1 pass to run rate in this game, and I think through most of the game you were even more out of whack than that. I think it was like 5-6-1 through a lot of this game.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not going to get it done. That's allowing you to become way too predictable, especially again to allow the offensive line to be put in that situation where not only they're having a hard time holding on for dear life with the talent you have out there, but then you're giving the defense an indicator every time that's probably going to be passed and that they can just not have to play the run at all. And it's not a recipe for success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was it? 7 rushes in that game versus 55 dropbacks or something. It might've been right around there because Geno Smith was almost our leading rusher in attempts, not yards. He almost had more rushing attempts than Ken Walker in that game. And those aren't planned, right? Those are scrambles. Those are passing plays that turn into runs. So
they are. And again, I think I don't want to put it all on this, but we got to also come back a little bit to the defensive side of this, because you are into the third quarter in this game and you're 10 points down. And no NFL team, when they're going to be 10 points down late into the third quarter, is going to be starting to, let's run the ball. Can he run the ball earlier, better? Yes. But then we also have to consider, again, back on the side, for that drive, that long drive that got down the field, and then it's a fumble recovery, and then you go get a touchdown. What then happens on the other side of that? You're kicking the ball back to the offense again, right? That's not going back to our offense back on the field. That's back to their offense. So you have a first half where you completely lose the time of possession. Then you find yourself midway into the third quarter, and you're down by 10 points. You can't run. And this is also in conjunction with the fact Grubb's aware of the fact his defense isn't stopping anything, right? So it's not about us just getting back to 10 points. It's like, are the Giants going to put up another touchdown in this game? Are they going to put up another drive that I've got to overcome offensively in this game? And you maybe don't want your OC to be thinking about that, but I think it's also a bit of kind of human nature when the defense is playing like they are. It's like you'd have to completely turn a blind eye. And I just think it's impossible in that moment because you're trying to factor a lot of things in as an OC in your play calling. And that's just one of those things I think that you'd be building in. So that did make this one last week against the Lions could have been better, but especially in the first half, but especially in that halfway third quarter, I think it would have been hard to pull off at that point.
Yeah, I get the anxiety that causes that, right? I totally get it. I do. Like you get anxious, not because the score's not out of hand yet, but you're thinking like, oh, it will be. And I was kind of okay with it against the Lions because you knew that game was going to be about. You knew the Lions were going to hang 40 on you.
Yeah.
So I understand you got to go, but there's still got to be a better way to do it than that. There's still got to be a better way to do it because, yeah, the offensive line isn't good at run blocking. They're not good at pass blocking either. They're not good at anything. So it's not like you can say that, oh, they're only good at pass blocking, so we're just going to pass.
Well, I think you got it too. If you're not going to run the ball, there's got to be more of the shorter throws. They did later in the game with this to Walker a couple times, Brendan, where just little short throws underneath, let him catch it, have some blockers set out ahead, and it becomes like a run play. Where, okay, if you're not going to run the ball, then some more manufactured kind of throws in there. Just throw it out to the flat, get him into here if that's the way you want to go with it on the other side of it. And he did start to do that a little bit later in the game and had some success. But there's more room to do that stuff on the side in the front part of the game, rather than looking at times, I think early in the game, we try to kind of push the ball down the field a little bit. We get a little bit caught with trying to get, especially the 5-7 step drop stuff and a little bit more maybe of leaning into that other stuff early on too.
Right. It's like that Andy Reid philosophy. Short passes to the running back are kind of an extension of the running game. It's like a long handoff.
Right. And it's not the worst of ways to go with a guy like Walker that gets him the ball out in space to work with, gets him away from the defensive line, gets him away from the traffic and the clutter, gets him out in space to kind of wheel around a little bit out there.
Mm-hmm. Long live the king. Thank you for the $5 again. Some hyper analyze a second round pick DK Metcalf with a microscope, but a first round pick like JSN gets overlooked. DK is a proven solid number one wide receiver. Yeah. And again, my thing with DK is I know the impact he has on every single passing play. He has a massive impact on every passing play, even when he doesn't get the ball thrown his way. So when he drops or when he fumbles, I don't like it, but I'm going to get over it because I'm like, the defense is terrified of him every time he's lined up on the field. Mm-hmm. And that impact, it's like Steph Curry can go 0 for 12 in a game from 3. It doesn't matter that much. The defense is still terrified of him. They're still playing everything differently because he's out there.
Yeah.
JSN, that's not the case. JSN has to produce to be worth being out there.
Agree. Yeah, there's a lot of value DK brings to the field beyond just receiving. That's plenty in what it brings on its own, and he's certainly outpaced JSN on just that side of it if you want to look at catches and receptions. But yeah, it's JSN at this point. We need to see more from him. I really do. You're the first receiver taken in that draft. Most of these receivers taken in recent years have been pretty good. Now, Quentin Johnson, the guy taken behind him, hasn't necessarily been great. Zay Flowers is still kind of fully rising to where he's going to be as a player for the Ravens, who went a little bit after that. But I'm still at a point where I'd like to see more from JSN on this, even if it's just getting more consistent in catches. If you're not going to get more targets, if you're not going to get more open, you're not going to be taking the top off the defense, then the opportunities you are given, you need to receive and make those catches, especially on rudimentary, simple catches that are, real base football play, stuff that you were running back in junior high. You got to catch that ball.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a different thing. And I know that you're also seeing the anti-DK sentiment come out. Like you see, we talk about the anti-Geno sentiment, the anti-McDonald sentiment. It's also happening a little bit with Metcalf because he's fumbled twice in a row. He's got some of these drops. And I kind of get it, but I think that you're really missing the big picture with a guy like DK. Like, again, I don't think the Warriors are thinking about trading Steph Curry after he goes 2 for 2 for 20 from 3 in a couple games, in 2 straight games or something like that. Like, they know his presence alone is worth it's priceless.
Yeah, I get that there's the people that are out there with the DK and that, you know, they have their issues with him. The fumble last week was one where you can control that. You try to extend the play. You have the ball out there like a loaf of bread. He comes back this week. He's falling forward on the play. He's not extending the play. He has 2 hands on his ball. What the F do people want him to do?
Yeah.
Well, that's how you teach on a football field. You say, put both hands. It's not out like this. He's got both hands like this on the ball, and the guy makes a nice punch out at the play. Does it something he needs to be aware of? Yeah, but if he's got 2 hands on the ball and the ball gets punched out, I'm going to have a hard time being mad at the player at that point. You're fundamentally doing what you're taught to be doing on a football field to hold on to the ball. And I don't think as though he's had his share of fumbles. Most of the fumbles, even the anti-DK people would agree, have not come by him holding the ball with 2 hands, but have come by him doing too much, by him trying to extend himself by too much. The problems from DK come from him by trying to do too much. It's never by him not giving out effort or being lackadaisical. It's by him doing too much. I'd much rather tell a player pull back than have to tell a player engage and go forward. I look at that defense this last week. I see a defense of a bunch of guys I have to tell, go forward, get after it, go. I don't have to do that with DK Metcalf. I never have to do that with DK Metcalf. And that's one of the reasons why I go, that should not be the point of emphasis. This should not be our point of concentration, those parts that are helping this team win football games. It's not say that player's perfect, not say that he rides on high and he can never be above any kind of criticism. It's that you want to put the criticism in the right place. Who's responsible for the majority of this loss? Who's responsible for the majority of the past 2 losses? Is it really DK Metcalf with his 2 fumbles and a drop or 2 here? Or is it more of a defense that gets no stops and is getting run over right to left, back to forth, however you want to give it to them, they're going to take it. And that's why the DK stuff that gets caught up of coming out of these games is understandable to put some criticism, but it gets hammered. These people that are anti-DK people, you got to understand, me and Brendan, we get hammered by you anti-DK people. Like, you're a smaller contingent than the whole overall fan base. You are. But you're really, really loud. Mm-hmm. And for being such a small minority opinion, being that you're not the majority of opinion, you should probably be a little bit quieter on that one. I don't think they will, but it's not one that I'm going to understand anytime soon, Brendan. I really won't. He's not a perfect player, but he's a guy helping you win football games, not lose football games.
Yeah. You ever heard of the, this was another Bill Simmons one, the 90-10 rule in sports?
Mm-mm.
Basically, the idea was, with the exception of generational talents like LeBron James or Shohei Ohtani, every player, even the stars, are going to have something wrong with them. Like, they're going to have the 90% good and the 10% bad. The difference is some players, their 10% bad is like right in your face. It's like very obvious. It's fumbling, it's dropping, it's stuff like that. But other players, they have those same problems too. It's just some of them have problems that are very quiet. Like when Lockett was in his prime, he had problems. He had issues. He wasn't a perfect player, but you barely notice those problems. They're not the problems that get up and scream and yell and get in your face and you're like, oh, wow, that's a big problem right there. But the problem is still hurting you just as much as they are with the other players.
Agreed.
And the example he used at the time was Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook when they were playing together. Kevin Durant had problems, but they were very low key. They slipped in under the radar. They were like, oh, he wasn't strong enough to get away from some defenders to get the ball. Like, you barely notice that stuff. But Westbrook, he had problems that were right in your face. Like, he would be suddenly shooting 35 times in a game. He would turn the ball over too much, stuff like that. So everyone was like, oh, Westbrook is terrible. Westbrook is awful. Durant is the greatest player ever. In reality, they both have probably about the same strength to weakness ratio, but one guy has problems that are just blowing up in your face and the other guy's just sneaking his in. And I think that's the issue with Metcalf. His problems get right up in your face.
Yeah, I think that's true. They're very dramatic, and they show because of that. They sit in the people's mind, and that thing that happens we talked about earlier too, like the block kick, comes into this, right? Where it's The 150 other plays stop counting, and it becomes this one play in the game that people will get caught up on, or a 2 play points of the game that they get caught up on, and the rest of the stuff gets thrown out the window, which isn't how we should really balance this. We should be taking it all into account. What's the cumulative? What's the net? That's what we're looking at. And he's a fantastic player. He's a game changer. He's a player that defenses have to account for every week. He blocks like mad. I'll take that guy on my team every day. You give me 53 DK Metcalfs, and I'll show you a team that can go and win a Lombardi.
Yeah, and as they say, Sydney Sweeney has a mole. I still want to sleep with her, and so do you. So
that's right.
Come off it a little bit here. Let's see. Varman, thank you for the $4.99. I meant to say, do you think the team improves next year with cutting Nwosu, Draymond, etc., and Lucas? Also, do you think Seahawks would win? Well, I don't know what you mean by win. I don't know, like win what? Win the division, win a game. I imagine that Draymond money could go somewhere to make the team better. Sure.
So it comes down to Varman. Nwosu in his first year was a great pickup in free agency, and he had a great first year for us. Good run defender, good pass rusher. Last year, you had pretty much the whole year absent, like 3 games, he was gone. He's been gone all of this year so far. Really, the impact he's brought the past 2 years has been null and void. So losing Nwosu at this point doesn't really take much away from the team, especially if you consider that there's not a high likelihood he's going to get more healthier here as we go forward, as he seems to be heading down a bit of the unfortunate Jamal Adams path here, where it's one thing after another a little bit. Draymond Jones has given you kind of a nothing burger as well. You've asked him to move to the outside. Everyone told me this offseason when I railed against that and said that the reason you signed this guy was for the inside. Everyone told me, no, he'll be dynamic on the edge. I got a lot of pushback on this one, Brendan. I said, that's not what you signed him here for. It's not what you signed him here for. Not been good off the edge. Not really a good, great a run defender as he should be, as a big edge out there at times. You're paying him a ton of money. What is he really contributing to your wins and losses over the past 2 years consistently? Not a whole lot, in my opinion. And so when it comes to those 2 guys and losing them, really there's only a plus to be had on moving on the other side of that. That money to be used in other places to better build and bring players on that are going to help the team. Maybe they get as injured as those guys, but these guys don't have really that upside as we go forward to looking at how they substantially help this team when you consider these factors to me.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Nwosu. Like, I don't want to freak out too much when it could be fluky. But my fear is that when he comes back, he'll have lost some of his explosiveness because these injuries just keep happening. I think that's a legitimate fear at this point. So I want to see what Nwosu does in December, because I do think he will be back this year.
Yeah, I'm not closing the book on any of the guys with it. There's plenty of time for them to do some turning around here. But if it just fits to form of the way it's going, Varman, then that's where I would expect the team to turn with it, because you're not going to pay these guys at this mark unless you're getting the real production from it. And sometimes not their fault. Like Nwosu had the dirty hit at the start of the training camp that started this off. It's not his fault on that, but you're going to have to make some tough decisions, because you have guys you got to pay a significant amount of money to this offseason. We have 5 major contracts, market setting type deals almost, you're going to have to hand out this offseason, and you're not going to get that done by keeping everybody.
Yeah, and the good news is you're liberated to do that, because Derek Hall has become who you thought he was going to be when you drafted him. And even in this one game where the defense really did not play well, I felt like Derek Hall was still out there doing his job, and he played a good game. So really happy about that. That makes everything easier.
He's really come forward. Yeah, you feel better about it because of that, especially the development of Hall.
Upo, thank you for the $10. I'm starting to think that Cam Ward is one of those rare QBs that can win games by himself. That means with 10 other average guys around. If we trade up to draft Cam, I won't complain. Geno equals love also. Yeah, that was a very interesting game. Did you happen to catch that game on Saturday night, the Miami game?
I've watched a couple of theirs this year, but I didn't see that one.
Yeah, they fell behind like 25 points in the fourth quarter, and then just came storming back. It was something else. I like Cam Ward fine, but I must admit that I fear that some team is going to get ahead of their skis here and take him much higher than he should go. Like right now, the mock draft database has him 9th on their big board. I can't circle the wagons around that one. That's too high for me for his skill set.
Yeah, I like him a lot, but I'm with Brendan on this one, where guys are locked into where they're locked in for me. And I think with quarterbacks especially, you see teams that get themselves into troubles when they start to raise guys up. Malik Willis going to the Tennessee Titans, Pickett going to 20 to the Steelers. Guys that shouldn't go really that high that start to get too elevated because of the scarcity of the position and the need of the position, and teams starting to overextend themselves. That I think Brendan's right, where at this point he's on track to probably get overdrafted from where he should go. I think he's right at being about a fringe first rounder, 25, 24 in the first round. He's not got the biggest of size. He's going to measure out about 6 feet tall, I think, when it's all said and done. Maybe they'll do that extra, give him an inch or something at the combine with his hair or something, but he's about 6 feet on the field. He's not the biggest, most stout of guys. He's got okay mobility, but it's not upper level mobility, and he's got a good arm. I don't know if I go great arm. So there's some stuff there to kind of take into account with him on that puts him into a first round point for me, but he's a good player. I just don't want to go to that. I think at the very least, Brendan, if not ninth, I think he goes as it's trending right now in the teens. And even that would be a little bit too high for me.
He's got that Sam Howell mobility.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be like 4'7", but let's break it down. 6 foot build, 4'7", slightly above average arm strength. Is that a top 15 first round pick, or is that more into like 20s?
Yeah. And at some point this year, we are going to do a show probably more dedicated to this, but I think there's a lot of pumping up quarterback prospects right now because the quarterbacks this year suck.
Mm-hmm.
Like Carson Beck is currently 8th. You can't tell me Carson Beck should go any higher than like the 2nd round. You can't tell me it. No way. Jalen Milroe is currently 11th. I know he's playing really well in terms of like numbers, but I'm not convinced he's a pro quarterback. You can't tell me he should go 11th. That should be a guy who goes kind of like maybe Jalen Hurts went, I think.
They're both 3rd rounders to me. I would even say that, and that's their height to me. That's as high as I would take those two players. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot of Riley Leonard's like this too. There's a lot of guys that really should be looked at in that. What it is, Brendan, is that we don't rarely get many drafts that have a huge collection of 3rd round quarterbacks, right? Where they're not those back end 5th rounders, right? They're not the Milton types of last year where you're like, oh man, he's got an arm, but there's so many holes here. They've got some legitimate talent to them. There's some stuff there, but it's not stuff to be elevated into that 2nd, 1st round. There's holes in that side of what they bring on the good side too. And you can't overlook either end of that.
Yeah. Shadur is 7th, and we know that's not going to happen because of all the off the field flags. Like, and you can't tell me he's worthy of a top 10 pick with all the stuff that's going to come with it.
Agreed.
Yeah. Quinn Ewers is 12th, and he's not even the best quarterback on his own team.
That's another guy that's going to probably be overdrafted that you just go, good luck. I hope to God we're not the ones. I've been worrying that John's got a chubby for that guy for the last 2 years, and I'm freaked out about it because he is broken inherently in his decision making. Where over the course of the game, if you ask him to do those high level throws, he is going to have a couple of just awful, boneheaded, throw it right to the defender kind of throws. And another guy without even worse mobility than a Cam Ward or Sam Howell, and he's got an injury history on top of it. I wouldn't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. And we know that the NFL, every year, it seems like they pick at least one QB to pump up before the draft that goes way higher than you thought. Like when I was a teenager, the best example was Jay Cutler. Out of nowhere, he gets boosted up into the 1st round when people weren't even thinking about him in the top 100 until a few months before the draft.
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill, great example.
Yeah. No, it happens every year. This goes on. We see it, and you want to be the team to avoid it. It's again looking at what teams do and make mistakes, and a trend of making mistakes and going, hey, look, this is not something I have to be a psychic to see coming down the line. I can see this team doing it, and that team doing it, and that team doing it, and that team doing it, and it's failed for them. So I'm not going to go do that thing. And quite honestly, I think that this is a part of the reason why where so many fans, Brendan, the last 2 years have been pushing John Schneider to go trade up in the draft and go get the quarterback and go do the guy. I think he's been kind of operating a little bit of this philosophy in place because he hasn't been as sold or not wanting to give up as much draft capital to go move up and get those guys that were up there to have to go and make those moves.
Right. But thank you, Upo. I do like Cam Ward. He might be my QB1. That doesn't mean I'm going to rank him all that high in my ultimate big board.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, he probably would be my QB1 to your point on that, but not, again, it'll be in that 20s range.
Y2K, thank you for the $2. Are there any teams that do a lot of zone blitzes? Let me think here. Like the Vikings are the team that blitzes the most right now, but I
mean,
don't think it's
there's
so
zone
much.
blitz concepts in all teams in the league, Y2K, but I mean, to the heart of your question, the zone blitz concept comes from Blitzburg. And Blitzburg, for about 25 straight years, could run that same kind of conceptual zone blitz stuff that they could get away with, to changing personnel and all that stuff. It had to kind of change over probably about 10, 13 years ago, where you couldn't make your blitz run system based all off of the zone blitz, that it would get cut up, that quarterbacks would be smart enough to target those defensive tackles dropping into space. But every team has zone built blitz concepts built into it. So a Vikings team has zone blitzes built into it, but they use every blitz in the book to go after you. We've got zone blitz concepts built into it. A lot of times when we're bringing double A gap mug pressure, might see those two linebackers go and two defensive tackles drop out. But it's not something that's run as a forefront philosophy of any defensive unit in football right now in their blitz concepts.
Yeah. I feel like it's a little too easy to beat if you're doing it too much.
Yeah. The whole point of it is to catch him off guard, and you can't do that if you're running it at a high rate.
Eric, thank you for the $9.99. I'm rooting for Geno so much this Thursday. He is going it his all, and I really want him to get a signature win against the stupid 49ers. Geno is such a pleasure to root for. Great guy. Yeah.
Really is, man. He's been a tremendous player for us, but to Eric's point, it's been for me, easy to get along with this because he does everything just like you'd like ideally your quarterback to do from a leadership standpoint, taking ownership, even if it's not his fault, elevating the cast around him, not asking the cast to elevate him, but him elevate the cast. He's doing all those things. And I'm with you, Eric. I'd love to see him get a signature win here. It's one of the places that people will bang on Geno. Well, who has he beat? Like they treat like he's the one that single-handedly has to beat these teams and stuff. Like what quality team has he beat? Like what, he can't play defense and offense too. So I hope the same thing, man. And I'm perfectly happy with this guy being our quarterback of the future. We're talking about this draft just a second ago, Brendan, and these quarterbacks coming out are not the greatest of quarterbacks. You want to get all big-eyed for these QBs and get your QB of the future. And I just want a fresh guy. I just want a new guy. I don't know if these guys are going to be the guys that get it done, both in the short term and in the long term. And you got a guy right now in-house that can do that. And he's 33 years old, got a couple years left. And I think he is the future for us as we go forward.
Right. You do not want to be the guy drafting a quarterback in a draft that is like this. That's how you end up having to overdraft somebody. Like, wait for the draft class with the Caleb Williams and the Drake May and the Jaden Daniels, because at least, even if you don't get one of those guys, at least the other guys have a chance of falling to you at a reasonable slot.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, this year, we're going to have about 5 or 6 teams that are in that QB needy spot. So how does Quinn Ewers, how does Shadir Sanders, how does Cam Ward get picked in the top 15? Because those QB needy teams are going to be chomping at the bit to pull them. So it's not only not you want to pick them really, but then you're going to have to overdraft them to get them on top of it. It's like a double crap sandwich of bad.
Yeah. I'm still waiting for like Ashton Kutcher to come down and tell me I'm getting punked on Carson Beck. There's no way this guy's a top 10 quarterback. No way.
I think after the Alabama game, his stock dropped considerably. He did not perform well in that game. And, he's got, his limitations are so much. I do not know that he is going to be elevated up where people think he's elevated. The arm strength's not there. The mobility is not there. And the decision-making is a little bit touchy because so much of what he does is pre-scripted in that offense. He knows where he's going prior to the snap. He knows which play, where it's heading to. He's not really processing back there. So I don't know how that trio of skill sets together gets a guy elevated into a second round stage. Because what do you lean your hat on as an evaluator of that? You're like, well, doesn't have the big arm. Well, doesn't have mobility. Size is okay. I don't know. I think you come back to the thing like this is like a Pickett then, isn't it? Pickett, not a lot of size, not a big arm, 1 year really of production, gets him elevated. I think that's where teams look at that as like, ooh, that's a pratfall there. That's that's fool's gold right there.
I think best case scenario, he's like, he could be like Matt Hasselbeck, right? And Matt Hasselbeck needed things to kind of break perfectly for him to have a good NFL career.
Matt was like, I think it's 6th round pick or something too with Green Bay. So it's like, you take him there, that makes sense, but not up in the 2nd, 3rd round when there's not a defining NFL skill set from that player. You're drafting more for the program at that point. You're drafting more of like the Georgia lineage almost a little bit there than you're actually looking at the player itself.
Yeah, remember Ken Dorsey? Remember Ken Dorsey?
Miami guy. Yeah.
Yeah, bringing him up for absolutely no reason whatsoever. But remember Ken Dorsey?
No, it's same kind of player though.
Yeah.
Big program and not a big arm, kind of frailly built, and but had the cast around him with his shot keys and all that at the time to go out there and light it up for Miami.
hmm Varman, thank you for the $1.99. Think the O line will be decent next year. Well, we don't have enough information to draw a clean conclusion on that. We need to know what they're going to do about the offensive line in the offseason.
Right now, Varman, we've got 1/5 of our long-term offensive line that we know for sure is here and in place. Charles Cross is set, left tackle. He's elevated. He's gotten to the place we hoped he could be at. That's great. Unfortunately, the other 4/5 of your offensive line is a major question mark. Connor Williams is on a 1-year deal. Laken Tomlinson's on a 1-year deal. You don't yet know what you have in Haynes. You hope he could become the starter, and we'll learn with that with time, but you don't know yet. You just don't. With the right tackle position, Lucas, is he going to come back or not? I think Fant's going to be released, especially if he doesn't play this year. So you're probably in a position where you may be very likely having to deal with at least 3/5 of your offensive linemen. You're going to have to address this off season. And does that mean it'll be decent next year? Honestly, I would say no. If I'm going to fit to what's been John's history over the last 10 years, it's that he's going to go out there and sign some value-based offensive lineman at $3 million. He'll try to maybe draft a guy again in the 3rd round and hope that will be enough to get it done.
Yeah, and maybe this year it will be enough to get it done, but this would be a great year to look at it and say, hey, I think this is the year you could really spend that 1st-round pick on alignment. There are going to be some, I think, good value guys there. Like this last year, you didn't do Fatanu because you didn't trust the medicals. And by the way, you probably got the decision right. I think we can say that now, right?
100%. 100%.
Yeah. But I think there are going to be some guys in the late 1st round, like that 20s range or even the teens, that you could look at and go, yeah, that's my right tackle for the next 10 years if we hit here. So you've taken care of the defensive line. You can't draft over there anymore. You've done a good job at edge. You've done a great job at corner. You've got a quarterback. You've got receivers. This might be the year.
I would love to see him, man. Go right tackle 1st round, go back to guard 2nd round, just hammer it. And I think you'll get the benefits of that, and you'd get the benefits of that very fast.
These centers suck though, man. These centers this year, I've been looking. Brailsford is the best one in Alabama, and he doesn't know how to snap the ball, driving me crazy. Yeah.
Well, it sometimes can be a lean group there on that side of it. So yeah, maybe we can get free agency with that one. I don't know.
Maybe Connor comes back. He's not playing great so far. Maybe we get him at a discounted rate, and maybe we're like, hey, another year from that ACL tear, we're going to get better stuff. Maybe.
I'll tell you this, at least he's like getting into that 22nd range of PFF, with Blythe and Brown the last 2 years. They've been like not even in the top 32 top centers. They've been in that spot where they're like 34, 35 in their PFF rankings where you're like, you can't even get into the top 32. Like there's a backup in the league better than you out there when they get out and play.
Yeah. Not what you want.
No, but he's actually up to kind of into, he's not playing well, but he's at least up into kind of like marginally better from where they were.
He belongs in the NFL, which I can't say about our last couple centers.
And he might get better as the year goes along as he gets healthier on that knee too.
And build familiarity with these players.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's possible.
Seth, thank you for the $1.99. Is there a way to move on from Draymond Jones? There's always a way. It's going to be a little more expensive than we wanted to, but I have a feeling it's going to happen at this rate.
Yeah, give you the exact breakdown here on this. So you get into this offseason, you're going to probably make what I would guess is that the team could see about potentially trade. I'm going to guess that there's not a trade to be happened because of how much base salary he still carries. He's got a $16 million base salary, but you can make him a post June 1st designation, I believe, after this and save a little bit of money at that point. I'm looking at this right now. So 16 million, he's at 9 on the bonus. So just trying to check these deals here. So 2 million. Yeah, you got a prorated bonus beyond that a little bit that they've stretched out some of that, but we can save a little bit of money on that. You can post June 1st it as well. But I would expect that right after this year set that it's going to go on, if not a restructure at that point, because he's not giving them the bang for buck there.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that could happen, I guess, would be we get our edge players back at the end of the year and Draymond gets to start playing in the middle full time again as a tackle. and he starts playing really well, then maybe the door opens a little bit.
Excuse me.
Sorry, that was a nuclear explosion right there.
I know we've gotten allergies are bouncing back up here the last couple of days. The change of season, so it's been brutal. Yeah, that's a possibility as well. That maybe they find more of a home from the inside. People have also said they don't feel like Draymond's a fit in this defense for what McDonald wants for the bigger, defensive lineman down there. He's, I think, just a man a little bit at a time, too, on this, just a tiny bit, but it just hasn't worked with him at an edge enough. He's not giving you enough out there to make this make sense.
Yeah, and again, that was part of the equation when you moved on from Carroll. You were going to bring in a coach who was going to look around at the roster that he inherited and be like, there's some stuff here I just don't like. Maybe it's good. Maybe another coach would like it, but I don't. And maybe Draymond's part of that.
Yeah. And coaches do typically come in, Seth, and they'll need that year to assess who's their crew, who's not their crew. And so he'll make the determination with Draymond, and we'll see how it goes. But if I was a bet man, I'd go that way with it probably.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, thank you for the $5. Let teams overdraft like this last draft and take the good players they decided. Yep. And take the good players they decided not to take. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Like, forget Byron Murphy for a second, which is a good example of what we're talking about here. But I think the Raiders probably feel pretty great right now about getting Brock Bowers at 13, while almost everybody in front of them took a quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's where I want to stay in that pocket of value, Jordan, to your point, and why I harp on this so much, and I probably drive people crazy by mentioning it over and over again, but why it's so important to stay in the pocket of value when you're drafting, because there's so much of a pull to go to need. I get questions from people where they say, so for the first 3 rounds, should we draft a right tackle, middle linebacker, and then a guard? I go, well, that's just about drafting for need then, isn't it? That's all you're doing at that point. And you gotta turn away from that as much as you can.
That's how you get LJ Collier.
That's how you get LJ Collier. That's how you end up with a Jermaine Ifedi. That's how you end up stretching for guys that aren't going to fill what you're thinking they're going to fill. You're going for the need, but you're not getting the player that's actually going to perform the way you want them to perform, because you're driving the need and not for the best player. So the Hawks the last 3 years have had great drafts, and they've done it because they stayed in that value-based model. And to Jordan's point on this, you've taken advantage of those other teams that are drafting to need, because we all like to think that these teams are super smart and that they apply a smart application here. But there are so many teams that draft for need, and you can see it draft after draft after draft. Even a team like the Rams that draft relatively well. Look at the desperate trade that they had to make to go get Braden Fisk, because they lost out on trading up for Byron Murphy, and they had the desperate need for a defensive tackle that Aaron Donald left. Is that going to work out in their favor? And I know that Braden Fisk has all these pressures and whatnot, but if you look at the pressures he's generated, it's all off of these stupid stunts that the Rams are running, Brendan. The guys can't win one-on-one, so they run these stunts constantly, and that's that whole combine they did, right? Because he's super fast, so he just runs around the edge, and he can do that, but that's not the same as a DT like Byron Murphy that's going to heads up, beat a guy, and whoop his butt right off the snap and get to the backfield on his own. It has to be kind of manufactured for Fisk, and they had to give up a future second to go get Fisk. So take advantage of those teams that are going to make those kind of moves and take those kind of things, because you're going to get some really good players on the other side. You're going to be able to build a hell of a roster staying in that pocket.
Yeah, absolutely. Like people, like, you're right. Every draft season, people are like, should we draft this position or that position? And it's like, I'm not really thinking about positions, right?
Yeah. That's the pathway. It just takes you the pathway to need. It's really, and it's people don't, it pulls you to need, and it gets you thinking outside of who's just the purely best player. And we've done such a good job of staying out of this. And it's something that I think people, this is how you end up with Byron Murphy when you have Draymond Jones and Leonard Williams and paying them that money. That's what happens, but you got the best player. You get the best value of the pick. And if you constantly pick after pick after pick in that place, you look 3 years down the line and you're like, look at this roster. Holy hell. But it's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Isaac, thank you for the member message. Member for 6 months over on Brandon's side. Happy birthday, B, yesterday, and Geno tomorrow. LFG.
Thank you, really? Isaac. Appreciate that, brother.
Okay saying how old you are now, or are you going to keep that one locked away?
It's the big 4-6, man. Big 4-6. I'm turn the corner here. I'm looking 50 dead in the eye.
Yeah. That's an interesting time for a lot of men.
You feel old, man. You start, the age clicks in. You definitely start to have all the little hurts, and you wake up and your ankles hurt in the morning. You didn't do anything to it. You get into that age.
Did you buy the convertible yet?
Not yet. The midlife crisis. I'm a couple years out. I'm a little late on my midlife crisis, but it's coming. I'm gonna get my hog. I'm gonna get my Harley. Start
Yeah.
smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, that's a good one. And yeah, Geno Smith plays on his birthday tomorrow. I did read about that.
It's good to see. Good to see. I guess we've had some success this year when we've had player birthdays or former coach birthdays when we played. So maybe that trend can
Yeah.
continue.
When Russell Wilson lost on his birthday, that's when we knew he was done. Because
Yeah.
he lost a game to I think it was either the football team or the Commanders in
The Magic.
2021 on his birthday.
The magic was lost at that point. It was gone.
Eric, thank you for the $4.99. I'm choosing to get positive. This week has been depressing after that loss, but we are moving on. 49ers going down, baby. Lumen, get loud.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, the Niners, they're not feeling much better than we are. That fan base is on the floor right now, just like we are.
It's all everything's right now. That's the thing about this team trying to find itself, Brendan, is that this division is as weak as it's been maybe in 8 years, and that there is an opportunity for your Seahawks to wrestle control of this division and firmly take control of it. You could end this thing if you can find a way to lock this thing in just a little bit. Because to Brendan's point, the Niners have not been strong this year. They've looked weakened. You got the Rams at 1-4. Cardinals are still the Cardinals, and where they look at all things being equal, they're not easy, but they're not ready to turn themselves into a place of really being a contender either. So it's right there for us to go grab. The schedule doesn't set up tough for us for the rest of the year. After we get through this this is really the toughest stretch for the 3 games at 11 nights. And then you're set. You have a bye week up at week 10 and everything kind of holds up pretty well. There's some tough opponents, but it's not brutal. Even that Jets game in New York down the line looks a little easier with Saleh out and them looking a little bit more in disarray. So it's right there for them to go grab, Eric. And one reason we can absolutely flush this last loss and just keep looking forward and just keep trying to drive forward is that you still have that chance right here. You're in first place. You have the chance with a win here, especially if you find this next coming week got a Cardinals team that loses and the next week Rams. Like you're really going to have a chance to take this by the stranglehold. So hopefully they understand that. Hopefully they can apply a little more sense of urgency this week than what we've seen the prior 2 weeks on that side of it, Eric.
Yeah. Next, the Rams have their bye this week, right?
Yeah, the bye. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they're probably already pretty sunk. I don't think they have the horses to come back from 1-4. That's such a daunting task for even a really good team.
Every team right now, the Niners may be absent Hargrave and maybe McCaffrey. We'll see with him. Has everybody coming back? So Kupp's due to come back in a couple weeks. Puka's going to come back a couple weeks after that. So what the Rams are just trying to do is stay close. And I mean, as it stands right now, they're 2 games out, 3 games out. As bad as the start is that they've had, they're still right there in this division. And so, especially if we lose this week, and then it's 3-3, and they've got the tiebreaker on the Niners, and they are then still kind of orbiting around on this division to be able to strike. So it does look to me a little bit like, Brandon, this is going to be the year where this division is not going to be a 12-win team is going to win the division. It could be a 10-win team that wins it, and that kind of leaves everybody in play at that point throughout the year. But you can stamp everybody out here early and quick if you don't mess about. If you don't, lose games that you should win, steal a couple games that might be on that line, you get out ahead of a couple games in front of these other teams and you change the context of the season consistently because but Brendan, you get a couple wins up here. Niners get a loss. Rams get another loss. Now they're not in go forward mode this year. Now Rams don't make that aggressive trade. Now the 49ers don't make that aggressive trade. Now you get them in certain ways kind of, laying over a little bit this season and how they look at it. Like it just ain't clicking in this year for us. We're in too disarray. We've got to turn this around a little bit. So that's a big part of this as well, as kind of getting out ahead if you can do it. It may be harder to do. Maybe we're not ready to do it, but if they could, that's also another possibility of that playing out that on the other side of it. First, if they're in it, they make those aggressive trades, right? If the Rams are in it, maybe they make that aggro trade to get a receiver like Davante Adams or something, or on the other side.
Ooh, Davante Adams. I didn't even think about that one. That's terrifying.
That would be terrifying. And something where Stafford and Davante Adams, and then he gets Cooper Kupp back, and then here comes Puka back, and now suddenly that receiving core looks insanely different.
But no reason to be pessimistic yet about the long-term, about the big picture this season. It's easy to be after that game, but it doesn't need to happen yet.
No. Just gotta stay and let the process play out, and trust in that we've got the right hire here in McDonald. That this thing will be good in the long term. It'd be great if it could happen in the short term, but it's about that long-term outlook here.
Holiest Hand Grenade, thank you for the member message over on Brandon's side for 15 months. False start of Fetty still gives me nightmares.
Yeah, Fetty was a guy Tom Cable special. Tom Cable at the end of his coaching career as an offensive line coach and had a great offensive line career and definitely understood how to coach offensive linemen. But once they took cut blocks out of the game and sort of removed out some of his tricks that I think he'd have as a lineman apply, you started to see him exposed as being a little bit limited as a teacher at times in these offensive linemen. And part of the reason that we had issues here with our offensive line through the years was that. And Ifedi is a guy you drafted who should have been right from the jump, moved to guard. Should never have been a tackle, should have been guard from jump. Still wouldn't have helped his false start problem probably, but maybe a little bit, I don't know, but was not a right tackle. That much is absolutely clear.
He's still in the league. He's actually played a little bit for Cleveland this year.
Okay. Is he got the way they got him at tackle or guard right now?
Looks like they have him at guard. He's only played 13 snaps, but he's still making a paycheck.
Okay. Well, there you go. So he's look, you could understand the natural build that he had, the length, the strength, he's built like a ideal kind of offensive lineman. It just came down to him, technique issues and feel for the game. And again, with him being on the outside against those edge rushers, he just didn't have the reactionary ability to stay with guys out there. Whereas inside, it's a little bit more just bump, 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 bump. It's more like a blink of the eye, just get your arms into him, be powerful, be physical, be violent. Helps him out a little bit. On that
I actually met Ifedi his rookie year. I actually got to meet him.
Nice guy?
Yeah, seemed like a nice guy. He was doing an autograph signing.
All right.
I had a coworker who met Tom Cable once, and he said that was not a very good. That's not a guy you want to meet.
Yeah, he seems a little bit like he's always got the a-hole meter turned up a little bit extra high.
Yeah. Okay, so we're 2.5 hours into the stream. We kind of have talked about this Niners game as we've gone through the donos, but let's go into a little more detail here about this Niners game. So we're looking at this team that is just as desperate as we are. They have a losing record through 5 games. They're not playing well. That defense looks like crap. They've let some very winnable games slip away here to start the season. That loss to the Vikings no longer looks like a bad loss the way that it did at the time, maybe because the Vikings have proven that they are a good team. So what are you trying to do against that Niners defense this week in particular? Let's start on that side.
Well, it's actually going to be pretty simple because they're not a complicated defense. So what you see is what you get with them versus other defenses where you've got to be more on point for things like blitzes and wild things coming at you and how they're going to run things. They're going to trust their front four to get it done. We talked about how the wide nine can be attacked in the running game, especially in the A and the B gaps. I think what they also do is because they don't trust the front four they don't trust the front four. They don't trust a light box to get the job done in the ground game. So what they will do with that is they bring that extra safety up, and then what that then creates is then one-on-one mismatches on the outside potentially for you, where you can now attack with a DK out there or a JSN out there, and they're going to get that one-on-one opportunity, but it's also going to be a one-on-one opportunity deep because the Niners will shrink down on you and they will close out the short routes. They'll have it one-on-one where you're going to have to beat them over the top in a very tight window. And so can you find some consistency running up in between that A and B gap? And then can you find those throws on the outside where when you look at the Seahawks against the Niners over the past couple of years in these losses we've had, we have not been able to complete the ball down the field on those throws. It's been missing time and time again. There was a trick play a couple of years ago where we almost completed it, but there was a penalty on the play. There's just always some kind of reason holding you back. But with this Niner team, that's the box they force you into because they're going to bring those extra guys up. They're going to have press coverage on the outside. Can you get it beat up over the top? I'd also do a lot of DK in the slot in this game because Chadarius Ward's a guy that has followed DK consistently when they've played in recent years, and he's an outside corner. And you saw with Carlton Davis a couple of weeks ago what happens when you take the outside corner and you move him into the slot and how uncomfortable you can make him in there. I would do the same thing to Chadarius Ward. I take him out into deep waters and see if he can swim out there with DK on that side of it. And I like that matchup a little bit better there. But it does come down, I think, a bit to that, where they will press the numbers up to make sure that you're not going to hit their light box. But then that does mean now you got to beat them up on the outside with one-on-ones. And they've got good corners out there to make it still, kind of cinch you up like we've seen in the past. So it really kind of comes down more simply in this game to me on how to attack that defense, but it's as much by the nature of how the defense is built.
Yeah, so it should be about execution this week, you would hope, right? The game plan should be pretty simple to dial up. You should have a good understanding of what you need to do to win this game. You just have to actually execute on it. So I can dig that. I think that's probably good. I think that the defenses that have really kind of gotten to the Seahawks a little bit this year have been the defenses that blitz a little bit more. That was something that we were talking about earlier this season.
Mhm.
So you're going to have to come up with an answer to that, especially if you think the Niners are going to be trying to send that kind of stuff because they don't trust their front four anymore. But how do you deal with Bosa in this game? Because he's going up against the guy who I think he currently leads the league in pressures allowed so far this year.
Well, Bosa stays to the blind side mainly. So
Mm,
they don't move. He's going cross. He'll be there 90% of the game on that side. So maybe they're a little bit they move him over against Stone. You still have to commit, I think, to giving Stone help. Leonard Floyd on the other side is a very functional pass rusher on the other side, and is enough of a problem for Stone Forsythe that there's going to have to be some help and some chips in there. On that side of it. This is obviously where throws to the flat, quick throws in space, getting the ball out of the hands of Geno, especially early on to get him in rhythm is something I'd love to see, but you've got to put it at the forefront of this as well. Is it, I know I want to hit it deep, but you have to be tactical when you hit deep because you're not always going to have the pass protection holding up to get the deep plays to develop, to open up for it. So
mhm,
there's got to be a balance on that. And you don't just attack one size fits all. Hitting the deep ball, I think, is going to be a determinant on this game of winning or not, Brendan. If you have 3 or 4 deep shots in this game and you don't complete one, you probably lose this game. But you also are going to need to hit those quick underneath routes, those quick throws out of the flat, help slow down some of that pass rush. The screen game, Grubb's got to slow down the pass rush with the screen game a little bit as well. So you got to kind of apply a couple different points on that to slow down more than just chip and dedicate the 2-man support. And I'd trust Cross one-on-one with Bosa at this point. I'd see how far I can get, give him a little bit of help, but not dedicated support as well, especially as I have to dedicate to help out with Leonard Floyd on the other side.
mhm. And fortunately, you probably won't have to help that much on the interior. They don't really have that kind of a penetrator.
Well, what I would do is I would do this. Wherever Malik Collins is at, I would try to skew some of my double teams too if I'm not getting any blitz looks. So, if he's going to be over on Lincoln, even if I want to typically slide my center to my right guard, I'm going to slide over a little bit more to Lincoln because that's where Collins is kind of the one guy on the inside for them to me that's really dangerous in being able to be a problem inside, like some guys have been against our interior line in there. So I would put a little bit more, not all the time 24/7, but I would skew it a little bit more to his side if he's going to attack Lakin off of left guard over there off the 3 tech and roll it that way.
Mm,
Other than that, though, no.
okay. So pretty simple understanding of things on offense, but I think this should be. I pretty much agree with everything you said. You get what you get what you see with that defense. So should be able to cook something up. Other side of the ball, the Niners actually playing quite well on that side of the ball so far this year. No
Mhm.
McCaffrey. I'm not going to say that they've completely replaced McCaffrey, but they've done a better job replacing him than most teams would do. So, what do you want to see from the defense this week with no Woolen? Although, real quick, let me just say this: McDonald has said that he's confident Mafe and Hall will be ready to play, despite them being
Okay.
questionable.
Well, Purdy's come forward as a player. Watching these games this year, he's playing the position pretty well. He's having a bit of a tendency where I think what's happened with him this year as an adjustment from defenses is the defenses are applying a little bit of the prior model of the Vikings and the Ravens of last year, Brendan, which is that we're going to fluctuate a lot of stuff post snap on him and squeeze down on a lot of the shorter routes. And now what that's caused Purdy to do at times is not as much trust his pre-snap reads like he was before. Because before, in prior years, hits the back foot, ball's out of his hands. He always seems to have the Shanahan plan of where to go with the ball. But this year, because of, I think, he's not able to trust as much what he's seeing pre to post snap, it's causing him to hold the ball a little bit longer, which is now bringing him in, which is taking him into sometimes some sacks and some pressures at times. Now, he's also able to do some improvisation stuff and able to extend plays and cause some big plays as well on the other side of it. It's like that Russell Wilson thing, that you get with that when you have a quarterback that holds the ball long, is that there's some good and there's some bad that you get on that side of it. But he's overall playing really well considering there's no McCaffrey. He's been out with times without Debo, without Kittle. The offensive line's blocking well. They're getting great play out of Pooney. Their 3rd-round pick that they took this year has been a top 16 guard in this league for them. The rest of the line's blocking well. Like even on the pressures that have been given up to Purdy, a lot of it comes back to him just holding on the ball too long, not them giving up pressure. Mason is not the kind of back I want to face this week, Brendan. We've had a hard time against guys like a David Montgomery or a Mondre Stevenson, really, really strong running backs that are hard to bring down to the ground. And this another guy's going to bring that up again today. So in this next game. So, the challenge is kind of there across the board, where they can hit you in all the places that you have been weak and vulnerable this year. And especially when it comes to the running game. And I don't know how we stop it. I don't know necessarily how we stop this offense looking into this game right now.
Do you want to go to maybe some more three-man fronts, maybe play a true 3-4, get an extra defensive lineman on the field here?
I would love to see that. Yeah, I would love to see that. Obviously, it's affected a little bit if you have no Tariq Woolen and then you have Nehemiah Pritchett out there, though. Now you're trotting out with Nehemiah Pritchett and Trey Brown on either outside, hoping that they can hold up against the Debos and the Ayuks. But I don't want to get run to death in this game. I don't want to be just slowly being worked down by Shanahan, because both these teams on a shortened week, Brendan, are going to love to lean into the running game, right? Like if both of these teams could come out of this game with 35 to 40 attempts and rushing the ball in a shortened week with tired teams in the middle of the season, they will do so. So I think if Shanahan sees early on that he can run the ball here, he's going to go, I'm going to stay with that. I'm not going to overthink this. One part that you can get into with this offense is that they've been one of the great strugglers this year in the red zone. That's been a place that they have just not been able to get it done. So, there's maybe a place to where you can score touchdowns in this game and they hit field goals. And maybe that's a bit of an inroad where even if their offense is being really, because that's been their offenses, it's been one of the more consistent offenses, one of the better at third down conversions, one of the better at having consistent drives. Every time they get the ball, they're going to move the ball, but it has come down to when they get down inside that red zone of it, the e-break gets hit and now they're to field goals and backup field goal kicker in this game. This could be maybe a way of where, okay, we're not going to stop that offense, but here's where we can limit them. If I'm McDonald, I'm sure there's a lot of red zone stuff that I'd be on my details of this week with this Niner team, where if we keep them to field goals, we know maybe our offense can put some more points up on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, McDonald had great success last time he played the Shanahan offense, right? So
he did indeed, man. He did it at the forefront here, which is just Brock could not trust what he saw. That's what stood out in that game, is that he thought he was seeing something, and then post-snap it became something else, and it was opposite of what he thought he saw. And that's also what the Vikings have done to him too. Vikings twice over now, right? That Viking team with Flores twice over. What's Flores doing? You're getting different fronts constantly. Like after that game, Brock went to Flores and was like, man, you're tough. It's like, that's what you got to do with them. Stack boxes, press coverages, fluctuating the coverages all over the place. Don't let him trust what he sees. Get him into, a thinking state, basically. Because Brock can process, Brendan, he can. But if you can get him into the confusion and you take the process away, now he starts scrambling, now he starts holding onto the ball, and now maybe you can get him into a little bit more of a perilous point and get some kind of cheap sacks a little bit at that point if you're not creating the quick pressure.
Now, obviously, Woolen's not playing in this game. We know that. He's already been listed as out, not even doubtful. He's out. Last couple times that Woolen has played against the Niners, though, he's actually ended up on the bench because Shanahan kind of put a spotlight on his inability to tackle and hammered that to the point where Carroll actually just had to pull Woolen out of the game because it was untenable. So do you think with Woolen out of the game, even though it obviously hurts the team, does that take something away from what the Niners might have been planning to do?
It doesn't, because I'm not sure that Nehemiah Pritchett's any better as a tackler than Woolen.
That's right. So it's going to be a thing where maybe he challenges that a little bit. Even not that I'm down on Witherspoon, big picture, but he hasn't been the greatest tackler either. So I wonder if they try to put our corners in that situation a lot in this game.
Trey Brown too. So yeah, I think it's absolutely right. Outside zone runs are a Shanahan staple. He obviously is diverse in his rushing attack. He'll hit you everywhere, but make no mistake about it. What they do with that, to your point in this, Brendan, is they'll take their blocker, their receiver blocker, like an Ayuk or a Deebo Samuel, and he'll come down there and he'll go take out an outside linebacker. He'll go take out an edge, and they will leave your corner freed up to one-on-one have to be the tackler. They will force your guy to be the tackler. And it has not held up for us well in recent history at the Niners when it's been that way. It's also something on the flip side that they do well. This is one of the reasons you can't really run to the edges against that Niner defense, is that yearly their corners are some of the best tacklers in the sport on the outside, especially in their commitment level to tackling. And so that is a place that they can definitely attack on us. And I'd expect Shanahan to hammer it outside the fly sweeps to Deebo Samuel too, all that. You're going to get a heavy dose of all this type of stuff. Why wouldn't he? Because that is definitely where you've been weak.
Right. Anything else to say about the Niners offense versus this defense? Anything else you're thinking about?
If I'm McDonald coming in this game, I've harped on this for years on it. You're coming as an underdog at home. You know, you're a 3.5-point dog at home, and you're supposed to be given 3 points for the home field advantage. You're really like a touchdown deficit if you think about it in this game in the outlook
Mhm.
of things. And maybe coaches don't want to be informed by that. Maybe they just want to be like, "That's no, we're good enough to do it." But you're not just going to be strong enough to line up and take them on head on here. You're going to have to create and try to help your players out this week. And you haven't done it on the defensive side of the ball the past 2 weeks. You've done almost nothing to put them in a position to be successful in the way that you're lining them up. And they've gotten decimated. So take some effing gambles. Take some effing risks. And if this team does that, Brendan, and if they lose by 21 points or 28 points, or it's the worst case scenario, I won't bitch and moan in the least, because I'll understand you walked into this game really light and really beat up defensively. And it's the third game in 11 days. And there's no reason for you to go out and win this on paper. There really isn't. So take those risks, take those chances, operate like you got nothing to lose, because you don't. And I hope they do. I'd much rather see them be aggressive on this game and on their toes and attacking than back on their heels again and sitting back in soft zone coverages and playing off coverage with the corners and dropping to big bail technique, deep drops. I really don't want to see that this week. I'm kind of tired of it. I really am.
Yeah. We thought we were done with it. Maybe Carl Scott was the problem all along, right? He's the one coach who's still here.
Maybe so. Other people say as well, I don't know, Dirt is also from the Quinn tree, which is from the Carroll tree. So maybe that's why we're running this stuff, because he's your DC technically. And maybe McDonald doesn't have as much, influence on that. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense though. The way you've lined it up the past 2 weeks, considering that you are as weakened as you are, considering, and I get the whole, well, maybe he doesn't have his scheme on board. Maybe these guys don't have, that's valid. That's good. Maybe that is. We are making the guess that that's the case at that point, right? That we are guessing that if it is that they just don't have all the details and he's still cinching everything down, that's a guess. And it's a valid one. Could be what's going on here, Brendan. But I really, after watching years of it happen here, like, this is not the path to success. Lining them up and saying, just get it done, is not good enough.
Right. And again, I mean, I go back to training camp. Remember, McDonald actually had a training camp session or two canceled because he was so happy with what he saw from the team, right? So there's no indication they should be behind schedule here. If anything, the indication is he thinks they're ahead of schedule. So to see a game like we saw on Sunday against the Giants was just kind of alarming. It's at least a little alarming. You're not alarmed about the big picture, maybe, but you're a little alarmed that they're not even trying to implement new stuff, it feels like.
That's my issue with it, is I there's nobody that's going to hold your feet to the fire for installing new stuff that fails. If you have a press coverage on the outside with Trey Brown and you run a blitz, and then they throw a 9 route with Daniel Jones over the top to Darius Slayton with you in press and he gets beat, no one's going to get mad about that. Like, you're trying to run your stuff. You're trying to run what your identity is, and you got beat on it. Trey Brown may not be a long-term cornerback here. You probably have a different guy in long-term. So, like, that's not the worst thing. But the worst thing to me is not pushing the scheme forward by running out how you want to run it in full. And I look at that Ravens scheme from last year and the way the Seahawks are running their scheme this year, and it just doesn't look the same. It's akin to Waldron coming in from the Rams and the offense not look anything like the Rams offense. And you go, what are we doing here? Isn't the point to try to onboard what you were doing over there? Is that why you came here for? And there's a reason involved, and I'm not sure of what it is exactly here, but it is a little frustrating and something that you don't need to apply this week, in my opinion. There's a different road to go here.
Taker, thank you for the $5. Do you guys have any draft regrets at this point over the last 3 drafts, or do you feel like we did a solid job? No glaring mistakes in hindsight. What do you think about that?
I think that you could look at the Zach Charbonnet pick and have some question marks on that one. There was that spot of that particular draft in particular of where they went through. There was some head scratchers on that one to me a little bit with that. And Charbonnet is not a bad back, but was that one of those key spots that going to the offensive line, finding an offensive lineman, much better trek would have been to go something like that there. I'm ultimately love the last 3 drafts, Taker, because the philosophy has been right that they've applied, and they've applied it, I think, at a pretty fundamental level, being that every pick is basically in that value-based role. What's the most valuable player on the board? Who's the highest guy we have on the board? Even in Charbonnet's case, I don't love the pick, but I get the pick where they looked at it and they said, this is the guy, highest, most talented guy we have on our board when we're picking here. And as long as the team's operating in that spot, even if I don't agree or disagree on a particular pick, the philosophy's right. And if the philosophy is being applied here and applied on a yearly basis, you will put together a great team. I trust in that process, even if not sometimes individual picks on it. But overall, love what they've done the past 3 drafts because they've operated from that philosophy, Taker.
Yeah, I think you can always Monday morning quarterback a draft. No team is going to hit every pick perfectly. And, that's not what I'm looking for the team to do. I'm just looking for them to make good decisions. And I feel like for the most part, they have. Like even the Charbonnet thing, like he's a good player. Maybe he's not exactly what you needed. Maybe he isn't as valuable to you as another player would have been in that slot. But you're stacking good players on top of good players on top of good players.
Yeah.
So if I have regrets about any one particular pick, I'm sure that I could spend some time talking about them, but I don't feel like I need to because I think the picks we've made have been good.
Yep.
Even like this most recent draft, like Tyrese Knight, I didn't know what to think of that pick. AJ Barner, I didn't know what to think of that pick. So far, so good on both guys, I think.
Yeah. I just, again, I think they're operating for the value. For me, it's in more than individual. It's about that philosophy, because where we went wrong for the 5 years prior to the last 3 years is that we operated solely within need. And Schneider said it 15,000 times over. Why did you get things wrong? Why was this way? Why was that, John, this way? Why was this that way? And how you drafted, John? Why did you guys do that? We got a little stuck in drafting for need. We got a little bit too obsessed with drafting for need. And okay, get out of that pocket. Yeah, it sometimes is just that simple. It sometimes is just that straightforward. And I think that is the case here on this.
God's Gang, thank you for the $2. How much of it does come down to injuries, I wonder? It's always a factor, but part of getting McDonald and getting this new scheme was the idea that the players wouldn't matter as much because the scheme is what's making opposing offenses so confused. So I can only go so far with that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have a defensive player of the year guy really outside of maybe Kyle Hamilton you could looked at on that Ravens defense. It was the assembly of the parts that got it done, but it was also how he schemed them up and how he called the games. And if God's Gang, if they were losing in the manner by which they were setting the stage with their fronts and how they were running coverages and how much they were trying to confuse quarterbacks in the same manner by which the Ravens were doing last year, then I'd be much more happier to chalk it up to injuries, to saying that that's why they've fallen short here. But that you're running your schemes and your fronts akin to how you ran it last year, and then you have the injuries in addition to that, well, it gets harder to necessarily just pare it down to just the injuries, because you're doing more of what you did last year, which we know doesn't fundamentally work at a schematic level. That's the whole reason you move off of Carroll in the first place, is that this thing ain't working like this. Running it like that is failing time and time again, like it has the past 2 weeks. So it'd be easier to put the spotlight on that God's Gang if it was, I could remove that first part of the factor too as well.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think people kind of get wrong about this from time to time. That Ravens defense wasn't super stacked with talent. They had good players, but they weren't like loaded with 8 all-pros or anything like that. McDonald was doing stuff that made it work with good but not great talent. So that's what I want to see here, because I don't think we have super elite talent. I don't think we have 8 all-pros here. You're going to have to go above and beyond to get elite results out of this group.
Yep. Agreed.
Mm-hmm. War Chief, thank you for the $2. No predictions, no talk. Beat those Niners.
Let's go.
Well, we are going to have to do a prediction here. So this one's tough, but I got to put you on the spot. And don't worry, I'm going to put me on the spot after it. What do you think about tomorrow night?
I think that we don't have any answers right now defensively for what I'm seeing from this team. And as good as they played in those first 3 games, I do feel like you got to have Bo Nix as a rookie quarterback in his first start on the road and against one of the tougher environments in the league. And Jacoby Brissett's about to lose his job. And you got to benefit from having Skylar Thompson as a non-functional quarterback in that other game. I think that Purdy and the Niners are well more situated to be able to take us out. I think that they score on us a good amount in this game. I think our offense is able to make its share of noise, but I think it comes down to a touchdown difference, 30-23, 49ers.
That is about where I am. I think I would say something more like I'm going to go 33-27. I'm feeling a lot of points. I think we're going to give ourselves a chance to win. But after that Giants game, it's just hard to feel great about anything, right? It's how am I going to predict a win after what I saw against the Giants? Maybe we can win, but you got to prove it to me.
Yeah, they're going to have to earn the reason. If we're going against quality teams and you haven't really gotten through a quality opponent in now 3 years, I'm not predicting against you going to quality opponent, we're going to get the dub until you at least beat one, beat a winning record team. I know they did Detroit last year, but that was kind of like your only real quality win off the back of last year. And so, we got to prove at one point or another we can take on these teams that are good and show me that you can get it done. So until they prove that, I got to go this way in the prediction game.
Paulie, thank you for the $5. I feel like our offensive line gets everyone's best shot. It's a known weakness, blood in the water type. Y'all agree?
Well, it's a little bit of an agreement. I think the blood in the water part for me, Paulie, is the lack of the running game. So it's there's a story that stood out to me. I don't know if you saw this, Brendan, where John Randall was on the Marshawn Lynch show with the he got thing with Robinson, and he was talking about a game with Boomer Esiason. And they had a whole thing where Boomer in this one game, they're watching tape and trying to figure out when it was running pass. And he found something to John Randall where he found that when it was a run play, Boomer was not strapping up his helmet. So he was leaving the strap unstrapped. And when it was a pass play, strapped up. So John figures this out during the week, tells all of his defensive buddies about it. They go out there and they have 12 sacks on the game. And Boomer gets freaked out. What's going on? How are you guys figuring this out? So when he's in offense, that defense knows you're passing and they can pin those ears back like that. It's not the same game as it normally is where there's that 50-50 chance of a run pass and they have to play discipline to the run first before they can become a pass rusher. And right now, too often in these games, we're becoming so one-dimensional right from the jump that then is giving these defensive lines a real big advantage, and it increases throughout the game because at times you're almost less running throughout the game unless you start to click into that mid-third quarter point where you're like suddenly start to decide you're going to run the ball. And now they're really, really pinning their ears back, really going. And so that's the blood in the water part of it, I'd say, Paulie, is that part where you just don't want to allow these defensive linemen to not have to play the run. That's where it gets really easy for them really quickly. And for an offensive line that already struggles against pass protection on good days when things are working right, you're now making it even harder on them in addition to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just situational, right? Our neutral pass rate over the last 4 weeks is 71%. The second place team is 59%, the Bengals. So it's not just, we have to pass because of the situation. No, we have to pass because we convince ourselves we have to pass. So I imagine that there is a little bit of that going on here. And you get some of these games where teams feel more liberated to blitz a lot because we struggle against the blitz. So until you prove that you can routinely beat the blitz, they're going to blitz more, stuff like that.
The blitz stuff's another blood in the water part, Paulie. I'd say the stack fronts and the blitzes along with that, with the lineman pin their ears back, where we've been struggling with that. It's really McDonald that created this, where his Ravens team last year showed that our pass protections could be exploited, and they've continued to be exploited. That's continued to be an issue for us to deal with that.
Right. So a little bit of truth in there for sure. But at the end of the day, the guys are just not that talented and not that cohesive yet.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. So that was a 3-hour show, which I was not expecting. I thought that, streaming midday Wednesday, everyone would be at work and everyone would watch us on VOD. But that was actually a lot. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to the show. Brandon, thank you for doing this with me. 3 hours. I mean, I was not expecting it.
Gotta do midday shows, man.
Maybe. But I'm going to be seeing you guys later. A couple more videos coming out later today. Brandon, we'll do this again next week. Probably the normal time again, if I had to guess, because we won't be playing on Thursday for a while this year. But that's what we got to say about this Niners game. We don't feel great about it, but the team can surprise us. They've surprised us before. We're used to being surprised. We'd like to be surprised this week.
Love to see it, man. Nothing make me happier than going out and beating the Niners.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We will see you guys again. And I mean, look, if nothing else, this is an opportunity to really put some distance between you and the rest of the division, right? You win this game, you're off to a 1-0 start in the division. You've got every other team in the division will have a losing record. You're going to be feeling pretty good about yourself. And maybe the team isn't great yet, but we have a chance to go out there and prove that we're good, that we're the best team in this division. You get it done this week, it's going to be really hard for anybody to say anything else. So let Brandon walk into that NFC West roundtable next week with a swagger. You know, he can be the king of that group for a week at least. Maybe he won't be king of the NFL, but he can be king of that stream.
It'd be nice, man. I'd be nice to make them eat some crow on that side of it if we could, especially watch Jesse's face.
So let's hit it, and then let's get out of here. Get back to our lives tomorrow night. Let's watch for the team. Try to surprise us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.